There we go. We'll call the Shakopee City Council meeting for August 15th, 2023 to order. We can get the secretary to take the roll call, please.
Delaney.
Here.
Councilmember Whiting.
Here.
Councilmember Contreras. Councilmember Lara.
Here.
Mayor Lehman.
Here. Item number 2, if you please stand for the pledge. Item number 3 is approval of the agenda with an addition of 3A presentation. Mr. Whiting,
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with the noted 3A addition.
Councilor Contreras. Motion by Councilor Whiting, seconded by Councilor Contreras. Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 3A, Mr. Delaney.
Yes. So tonight I get the honor of presenting our mayor with the 169 Coalition Catalyst Award for 2023. I haven't worn my pin, I'm bringing the chambers here. And a couple of things. Why is 169 important? Well, let's look at the numbers. Over 30,000 tons of freight are shipped per day on 169. 40% of Minnesota's employment is within 10 miles of 169. Up to 6,400 heavy commercial vehicle trips are taken daily on 169. 200% growth in agribusiness freight is expected by 2025 as a result of 169. And also 169 has contributed to the growth of our city. The 169 Coalition is an official advocate of the 169 corridor and is made up of several member cities. Our mayor has been our city's liaison since its inception. What are some improvements that have been completed or starting during Mayor Lehman's tenure as our coalition liaison? I'll list a couple. There's many, but let's talk about the 169-282 County Road 9 stoplight removal in Jordan, which is starting up here. The Port established updates along 13, which everybody's probably familiar with. And the 169-494 interchange, which completed several years back. Some of Mayor Lehman's highlights as a member: he provided critical insight into the 101 bridge development, which resulted in a more traffic-friendly, lower-cost design using a roundabout. He has served as vice chair for several terms. Mayor Lehman has been a strong advocate of improving 169 both north and south of Shakopee to enhance safety, reduce congestion, and maximize economic development along the U.S. Highway 169 interregional corridor. Thank you, Mayor Lehman, for your service to our city, for your leadership on the 169 Coalition. And with that, I'd like to present you with the 2023 Coalition Catalyst Award. And it reads, for your years of service, steadfast dedication, and commitment to improving safety and mobility on the Highway 169 corridor, 2023. Mayor Matt Lehman.
Thank you, sir.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
Don't drop it.
Does council want a photo op?
Perfect. Let's get some photos.
I'll put my walking glasses on for that.
The mayor want a photo op.
Cut yourself some slack, would you?
I'm actually going to center.
Here, let's do it this way. No, you're over the top. Yes.
That's the glue that binds things together.
Have work to do. Thank you, Councilor Delaney. I will say there's still work to be done. The river crossing, 169 river crossing, we all know the battles that we faced there. We were successful in the 169 interchange. And some other projects that were needed for Shakopee. So the work isn't done, and we really need to get that capacity across the river. So keep up the good work in my place, sir.
Zimmerman, or is that the next one, or up north?
Golden Valley's got a project on Pillsbury Avenue that, you know, the 169 Corridor Coalition is trying to fit into the mobility study, which goes from Marshall Road up to 55, so that in the future, any changes along that corridor are built to the design that would fit the future plan of adding a lane in both directions. So, as you notice, like on Anderson Lake Parkway and some of the other bridges that have been replaced over the years, they replace them with the mindset of moving the center pillars back so that there's space to add that lane in the future. So the mobility study is getting dusted off, and you guys are going to work on that and update it because it's been a while. But yeah, this stuff, you know, if we're going to grow, we're going to need that capacity, and very critical. So item number 4, consent business. Any changes to the consent agenda? Mr. Lara.
Pull 4C1, please.
Other changes by council? Changes by staff? No, sir. Mr. Whiting?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda with item 4C1 pulled.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Whiting, seconded by Councilor Contreras. Mr. Reynolds, will you please read the consent agenda?
Yes, sir. 4A1 are the city council minutes. 4A2 is the fire department services evaluation. 4A3 is a monthly financial review for July of 2023. 4A4 is a congressionally directed spending application. 4A5 is a Minnesota State capital budget application. 4A6 is a special event for Babes and Pullman's anniversaries. 4A7 is a Shakopee Fire Department Relief Association pension benefit increase request. 4A8 is the approval of a temporary on-sale liquor license for the Shakopee Chamber of Commerce. 4B1 is a drainage and utility easement encroachment agreement. 4B2 approves plans and authorizes the bidding for the Shenandoah Drive CR 101 traffic signal. 4B3 is a professional services agreement with Bolton and Mink Incorporated for the Southbridge Lift Station. 4D1 is a preliminary and final plat of the Aggie Edition, First Edition. 4D2 is a planned unit development for District Number 11, Arbor Bluff, and preliminary plat of Arbor Bluff. 4E1 is a declaration of surplus property. 4F1 is a declaration of surplus equipment. 4F2 authorizes equipment purchases.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 5, recognition of involved citizens of the city of Shakopee. If there's something not on the agenda that you'd like to address the city council on, now would be the time to do that. Please step up to the table here, have a nice comfortable seat. We'd love to hear from you. Name and address for the record, please.
It's Dave Thurmer, so 739.
Sir, I'm sorry. Can you please pull that mic up so we can hear you?
Just grab the whole base and move it towards you. There you go.
It's Dave Thurmer, 739 Madison Street. And it's about a ordinance. If you don't mind, I'll just read this. I think it'll be easier for everybody to understand.
Yeah, we're going to have to get that mic close and speak up. We can barely hear you. Thank you. There you go.
Myself, I believe the city is overstepping the rights of property owners in the city of Shakopee. I think it's unfair to charge homeowners with a maximum of 180 days in jail and $2,000 fine. And if the homeowner feels they should be allowed to use their property that they pay several $1,000s of taxes for every year and have a home on, and believe they should have fair use of their property without harassment from the city code enforcement. It is not, I don't believe it's fair for the city officials to walk up on my driveway 64 feet and take pictures and line them up so they look more impressive when they go to court, and then use in court to prosecute homeowners. When I ask why I'm getting singled out, I was told it's people like you that get the tickets. I stopped at the courthouse law library to find out what the statute said, and the law clerk said there was no statute. I asked how I can get a ticket. If there's no statute, she did not know. I also looked at the ordinances and cannot find where I violated any of them. When I asked prosecutor, I was told at the code to look at the code. I never received a rule book or was told anything before I bought property, a home in Shakopee. These properties are not HOAs, they are single-family homes. They could do this to everyone. I feel the court's time, the city's resources and taxpayers' money should be used in a more beneficial way for taxpayers than prosecuting residents and property owners who live and pay taxes in the city of Shakopee. I take it seriously. 2 misdemeanor charges up to $2,000 in fines and 180 days in jail. I think I am a good neighbor. I pay property taxes, own a home, and do not understand what is that much different about my property than that is 90% enclosed with a privacy fence. That's all I have to say.
Any questions? Questions for the,
Which ordinances we're talking about?
It's both ordinance 151, 106, and ordinance 5106.
151, 106, and 51.06?
Right.
Okay.
And I walked around to the neighbors, and I've got like 35 different signatures from the neighbors. They say none of them complained or said anything, and I drive around town as much as anybody else does, and I have one bucket in my front yard that catches the rain coming off of my house, and it's not like it's a junkyard or anything. I have some stuff out in the backyard, which has an 8-foot privacy fence all the way around the whole backyard. That, I do some gardening, and I make custom knives out of my garage. So I have some supplies sitting outside, but other than that, I don't understand why I'm being picked out or singled out, I guess.
Okay. And just so you know that our policy for citizens to come forward on items not on the agenda is to listen, ask any questions that we might have. We're not going to try to solve your problem here tonight. And just so you know, we are receptive, and if there's questions that need to be asked by council, they certainly are able to do that at this time.
I have a court date on September 15th, and this is like the third different court date I've had. So the county is taking it seriously. They originally started this on November 2nd of last year, the very day we got 2 feet of snow. And it's just snowballed from there, I guess.
Okay. Any questions from council?
Thank you.
Is there anybody else here in the audience that would like to address council on an item not on the agenda? Here for an item not on the agenda, now would be the time to step forward. Seeing no additions. Item number 6 would be business removed from the consent agenda, which we removed. 4C1, Mr. Councilmember Lara.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to take this time to acknowledge the Lions Club for their monetary donation of $1,000, which will be used to purchase repair parts for the splash pad at Lions Park. So I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution R 2023-094, accepting a monetary donation of $1,000 from the Shakopee Lions Club.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Mr. Whiting seconds the motion. Any discussion on the motion?
I would just like to thank the Lions for their continued support for Lions Park, and the splash pad was one of their projects, and they continue to support many things going on in the park, and definitely a donation to the splash pad is right in order with what they're doing. So thank you again.
Absolutely. Shout out, thank you to the Lions Club for their donation of $1,000 toward the splash pad. Requires a 2/3 vote to accept donations over $1,000. Any other questions of the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Delara. Item 7A1, acceptance of award of bid for pool construction at Sand Venture. Mr. Kersky.
Mayor and Council, this is the first big step, and as you requested, we are bidding out the items. The first big item that was the big unknown was the actual renovation of the pool. So Brad is here from RJM. He's our Vice President in charge of the community who's been working on this project. And I will say RJM and their CEO did meet with the pool company. We only had one bidder, and they were able to value engineer to make sure we kept the project on budget. The only pieces that are optional at a later date would be the theming of the climbing wall. I think in the original renderings it was a pirate ship. That was just a concept, so that's being left out. And the 2 shade structures on the boardwalk in the pool area and the ropes to the center island. Those are all taken out for now, but the entire pool system would be rebuilt, including refinishing of the existing slide and building the new diving walls that are necessary.
Questions of staff? Mr. Lara?
So, Mr. Kursky, I have a question. So we gave guidance in terms of where we were wanting to be for budget on this project, and it looks like that we're going to be approving this in pieces.
Mayor and Council, that's correct. So in order to get the pool done, the pool will close at the end of this month, and that is the longest lead time item. So if nothing else happened, we'd have a new pool next year. So at the same time, they're then bidding out demolition of the existing buildings and footing a foundation, so over the winter they can build the buildings. They're much more confident on those prices. The pool was the big unknown. There aren't very many contractors that'll work on a sand pool, hence the reason why we only got one bid. There are lots of other people that can work on the buildings and other items in the project, and they feel very comfortable, and Brad can talk to that, that we'll get very competitive bids on the rest of the project.
Follow up, Mr. Lara?
Yeah, I mean, as long as, I mean, I'm concerned that as the few months go on that I don't like surprises in terms of, you know, with guidance, and then all of a sudden like, oh, we're going to be over budget or anything like that. So, but I mean, as long as we're having assurance that like this will still remain competitive, I feel no
The
issues.
technical term is change orders. And you're right, because unexpected change orders could really put a curveball in this. So, do you have follow-up questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Any other questions from council for staff? I don't know if mine is going to be directed at you, Mr. Kursky, or the consultant that we hired, construction manager. You know, we talked a lot about the piping that goes from like the filtering house to the pool, how it's old and needs to be replaced. A lot of that is underground. And the actual sand filters and the chlorination plant and all that other stuff. What exactly is included in this? I know it's got a listing in the back here. But a lot of this is, you know, this is not my area of expertise by any means.
So Mayor and Council, the chlorination and the sand filters were replaced because they had failed a couple years ago or a year ago. This will substantially improve the water quality. Right now it all drains to the west. By building the boardwalk, we're adding a whole new loop of drainage, which will improve the water quality and assist in the filtration system. So all that will be all new piping. The only thing they're actually preserving from the existing pool is some of the sand. They're going to lay the new liner on top of the existing sand and then put new sand on top of that. That saved about $1 million.
with all them pipes that we were concerned about, I assume they like go out underground from the pool, or are they one side? I don't know.
Brad will be happy to answer those questions.
Okay. You know, I have this vision in my head that you have this round pool and you have these pipes like spiders all over coming out underground, but I don't know if that's true or not, so.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Brad Barrickman with RJM Construction here. We are replacing the main drains in the pool, so that is the existing main drains will be removed, and we are replacing them with new main drains. There are some pipes that will be replaced as part of this construction. The only thing that will remain is the perimeter gutter system. They'll make repairs to the perimeter gutter system. And then the new rim flow gutter system that will be installed on the boardwalk structure and other areas of the pool will relieve the pressure that it has experienced previously when you had some of those failures of that system. This new rim flow will take some of that pressure off of that existing system and allow the clarity that everyone's looking for here. So the new sand, the new main drains, and then these rim flow gutters will provide that clarity that we're trying to achieve.
Let me try asking this in a different way. When you say it's gonna relieve it on the existing system, it's the existing system I'm concerned about. I mean, we've seen pictures here on council when we had blowouts and pipes underground and look pretty rusty, must be cast iron or something.
Mr. Mayor, so we are replacing the piping that is underground. We are not replacing the perimeter gutter system that is in place right now.
Okay.
So the piping that's underneath, there will be new piping going to the pool equipment room.
Okay. Thank you.
And Mayor and Council, the ongoing issue, Mr. Tobin's not here tonight, nor his staff, but the water, when they have issues with the water, it clouds up because we only have one side of drainage. So RJM worked with the pool contractor and the pool designer to come up with a way to keep the water cleaner. And the issue we've had is we've been overloading those pipes that were blowing up because it's overloading the chlorination and the sand filters by putting a whole nother system in. It lessens the demand on that.
Okay. Questions, council?
Question.
Mr. Delaney?
Mr. Kursky, what's the difference between bid pack number 2 and bid pack number 3?
Remember the council, bid pack number 1 is the aquatics. That's what we're here talking about tonight. Bid package number 2 is the demolition of the existing building and the footings and foundation for the new building. And then bid package number 3 will be the actual building itself. And while we went out for bid for the aquatics portion, we have been doing budget updates on the design. We've actually sent it out to market just to verify pricing to ensure that we're bringing you a project here tonight in just the aquatics that we know we can afford the project as a whole.
And I think it's safe to say from council that it's okay to be under budget.
Is our goal.
Mr. Whiting?
Well, thank you. This pool is very unique, and it's actually a surprise we found a good pool manufacturer. It makes sense that we're bidding it out in packages because, you know, a building contractor isn't going to be a pool contractor or builder. I think I'll go back to the gutter question. Now, the gutters are feeding the water back into the filter system or the pump system, and those wouldn't be leaking because they're more of a collection, and the other ones were under pressure. Is that probably more accurate?
That is correct.
Any other questions from council? What's the wishes of council? Councilor Contreras?
Thank you, Mayor. I understand what we're doing, and I feel that at the rate we're going, we should be good and under budget. Fingers crossed. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to award Sand Venture bid packet number 1, Aquatics to Global Specialty Contractors, Inc., in the amount of $2,534. No, $2,534. You say this? $2,534,792. There you go. Sorry.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Contreras, second by Councilor Whiting. Any questions? My only comment would be when you're bidding out package 2 and 3, if 2 comes in and you know where you're at, then your 3 could possibly put you over budget, and
I'm not sure we can award 2 without knowing 3.
Right, so we'll see how this plays out, but, just a comment. Anybody else? Any discussion?
Yeah, I think the pool is necessary. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, thank you. We've talked about this pool. We've been back and forth. The public love the pool. We're not making we're not doing anything to the buildings yet, but we're fixing the pool, so we got to do that. This is what we're looking for, and we may need more. But this is our base, so I think we're on the way.
Okay, any other comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Good luck to you. Item 8A, Shakopee City Government Engineering Department. And Alex, you probably weren't given a heads up, but past engineers, this, for some odd reason, this council and past council had something with the videos with the sewer system.
Sewer videos, yeah.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have a clean sewer video to show you tonight.
Somebody tipped him off.
Mayor and Council, thank you for having me tonight. I'm excited to be before you and share a little bit more about the City of Shakopee's Engineering Department. Goals for my presentation is to be under Public Works' hour maximum that they've established for the presentation, to introduce the department and staff to you, provide you a summary of our organizational tasks, and provide an update on current and highlight future projects that are programmed. Who we are. This is a list of our engineering department staff. I just want to highlight a few of our staff that have pretty significant years of service to the community. Ryan Borman and Carmela Naseen, both with 16 and 17 years of service. What this shows is we have a strong department, people that like to work in the city and have a lot of historical knowledge. I will show you a picture of our staff here, working from left to right. Ryan Borman is our GIS coordinator. Micah Heckman is our assistant city engineer. Darren Manning is our project engineer. Myself, next to Darren. Alex Enye is our senior engineering technician. Kirby Templin is our water resources environmental engineer. Henry Pagel is a graduate engineer. Josiah Ferguson, who is here tonight representing our engineering department, so thank you for coming, Josiah. He's also a graduate engineer. And then Carmela is our administrative assistant. So that's our small makeup of our permanent staff. And then also, we were fortunate enough this year to have 4 summer interns. So working from left to right, we have Tien, Justin, Kevin, and Mason. Both Kevin and Justin have already gone back to school, but Tien and Mason are here with us for the next couple weeks. They've been awesome help for us, assisting our department and our staff, so we're lucky to have them. Highlighting our organizational tasks. Our engineering department is broken up into 3 different areas: engineering, GIS, and then environmental and natural resources. From the engineering perspective, we're responsible for the planning, design, construction, maintenance of our public infrastructure. So that's anything from streets, trails, sidewalks, sewers, sanitary systems, stormwater management. We help out a lot of different departments, our public works department specifically, but it's our job in engineering to make sure we have an efficient and safe system throughout the city to serve our residents. We're also responsible for state aid reporting. As a municipal state aid city, over 5,000 residents, we have certain tasks that we need to complete and report back to the state. Mainly those include keeping annual traffic volumes along our roadways, certifying when we construct new roadways so the state can keep track of the roadway systems throughout the area, reporting our updated maps, and also updating our needs system, which is essentially reporting the value of our infrastructure and what it would cost to continue to maintain that. We're also responsible for assisting our community development staff on development reviews of engineering designs and also our comprehensive plans for our roadways and sanitary sewers and stormwater management systems. We're responsible for traffic safety and operations, making sure our roads are safe for the public throughout the community. I would say that we wouldn't be able to function as a department without working collaboratively with agencies, not only different departments throughout the staff, but Scott County, Shakopee Public Utilities, MnDOT, the Department of Natural Resources, MPCA, Met Council, and many others, whether that's developers, their private engineers, things like that. We couldn't get done what we are tasked to do without working collaboratively and having good relationships with those folks. With roadway improvement projects and other utility projects, we're also responsible for calculating and certifying special assessments. So our staff work directly with Scott County and making sure that those are accurate and reported appropriately to the county to be put on taxes. And then also, as an engineering department, we need to be the technical resource for the community. If residents have questions, if business owners have questions, we need to make sure that we can help them solve their issues, whether we help them by doing the work or give them the technical guidance so they can fix things themselves. That's our responsibility as engineers.
Do you also decide, if you could back up one?
Yep.
Do you also decide where the state aid dollars, to which road that qualifies for state aid dollars, how we're gonna use them, when we're gonna use them, and on what portion?
Yes, that's a great point. So based on the amount of miles in our city, how much traffic we have on our roadways, we get a disbursement from the state, which is essentially state aid allocation. We can use those dollars only on state aid roadways. So when we program projects, we look at, which projects account or meet those minimum requirements for the state aid. One project this year would be the 169 pedestrian bridge. The majority of our state aid allotment went to that project because it was state funded and met those requirements. There's other projects in the future that we do program those costs as well, so we need to work with our finance department to make sure that we're using those funds appropriately and allocating those resources.
So 13 and Shenandoah stoplight, that road used to be a state highway. I think it's now, is that a county road now?
That's County Road 101, correct.
Okay.
And we can use state aid funds on county state aid highways as well. So that is a point. If the county is leading a project, we can use our city state aid funds to help fund our shares of those projects.
Okay, thank you.
I like to highlight this picture because this is our engineering interns doing some of that grunt work. On the right, you can see us laying out road tubes and collecting those traffic volumes. We had them out throughout the whole summer on our streets, collecting those traffic volumes, and also looking at our ADA compliance. So these are our pedestrian routes. So if people are disabled or in a wheelchair, that they can manage our sidewalk and roadway system appropriately. So they're out throughout town prioritizing projects. So if we did have issues, throughout the city, that we can make sure we can allocate funding in the future for those. And this was at City Hall, and we met with flying colors, so.
City Hall.
Moving on to GIS for their organizational tasks. I love this picture on the right. This is our city maps. So this is what staff uses internally to manage all of our assets and infrastructure. This is over by Hy-Vee and Tapa Park. All the different colors represent different assets in the community and different points. So our GIS department keeps track of all of this data. For reference, we have 172.3 miles of streets, 144.3 miles of sanitary sewer, 159 miles of storm sewer. We need to know that information to the 10th of a mile because we need to prioritize funding for future projects. And we keep track of all those resources in our GIS department. Our public works staff uses these when we have to go locate a sanitary sewer system. If someone is doing some work on their property and they call on a locate, we can use our GIS system on their phones and pull up the actual record drawings, which we keep track of from an asset perspective. So Ryan Borman is in charge of keeping track of all this data. Today we had an issue where city maps went down, and I heard from 4 different departments that it was down. This is something that people rely on heavily, and he was able to get it up and running in a couple hours. So it just goes to show how important it is from the city to keep track of accurate records. Data management, again, keeping track of those as-builts for record drawings so we know what's in the ground and when it was placed and the age of the infrastructure and what type of infrastructure it is, and also keeping track of easements and agreements that have been recorded on people's properties. We keep track of all of that in our city maps database.
All right, what are all the purple dots in Lions Park there?
Those, I believe, are, that's a great question. They're irrigation, that's exactly what I was gonna guess, but I didn't want to. And the black dots as well in Tapa. And the blue lines are actually, this is a good one. The blue lines in the top right corner, that's the drain tile outlet for Lions Park, the splash pad. So we know there's a break in that line because that's where the splash pad is continuing to fill up. So we can use this data to go find the break in the line and know exactly where it is.
That's pretty cool.
From a mobile perspective in different devices, our staff use field maps and Survey 123 to manage different assets. So if we have a task that's created with our Public Works Department to go fix a manhole or catch basin, they can use their phones to keep track of what was actually repaired on a specific structure that has a specific ID, and they can use these databases. We also keep track of how much salt we're using, and for snowplow roads, which Bill pointed out in his Public Works presentation as well, all of that's managed through our GIS department.
Question.
Yep.
Is the GIS information available to the general public, or if a property owner in town wanted that information, do they come to City Hall for it?
So it's not, City Maps is not available to the general public. A lot of that information we like to keep in-house. We do share that information, so if someone wants to see an as-built of what's on their street or utility, we can print those out for the public and provide that information. A lot of developers and their engineers look for that information too, where they're building a new road to tie into an existing one. So they don't have access to that database, but we can take information and provide it to them. I will share what the public does have access to in this slide. So our GIS department also puts together forward-facing maps and information. So a lot of our maps and GIS databases that are put out, like our park and amenity finder, when we look at precincts and polling places for where am I actually going to vote, all those maps are available on our GIS database. It lists current city projects, active developments. So if someone wants to know what is being graded out there, we can point them to our GIS database, and we house all of that information together. Moving on to water resources and environmental resources. This department's responsible for anything outside. Natural resources, from stormwater management basins to trees, to creeks and waterways, to lakes, to wetlands. We're responsible for maintaining and managing that infrastructure. They're responsible for preparing stormwater improvement projects, whether that's replacing or maintaining what we have today, or for future projects and working with developers on constructing new infrastructure. We're responsible through the MPCA. We have a permit that's called the MS4 permit. We have several tasks that we need to complete to meet that permit requirements. It's very forward-facing. We have to reach out to the public and provide education and outreach. One example is illicit discharge, to make sure the public is aware of things that they shouldn't be putting down our storm drains that could impact our natural resources. That's a permit requirement through the state that we need to meet as a community. So when you look at our Hometown Messenger and other things that we put out that information, that checks that box from our state permit, and it's also good information for the public to know. Within the city of Shakopee, there are 3 watershed organizations. So there's essentially where does the water go throughout the city, and their watershed districts manage that drainage. So the Lower Min, Prior Lake, Spring Lake Watershed District, and Scott Watershed Management Organization are all different districts that we need to work within the city of Shakopee. And some of the differences are they all have different standards and expectations and allowances for discharge rates and water quality standards, and our staff needs to be aware of all the different areas that we need to meet as far as our design standards and requirements. We're responsible for enforcing the Wetland Conservation Act. So if people or developers or construction projects are impacting wetlands, we're responsible to ensure that they're meeting the requirements to avoid or minimize those wetland impacts to preserve our natural resources. And they're also responsible for tree removal and tree pruning, which I will get into here. I'd like to share a couple examples of some stormwater improvement projects. These are projects that, on the left, our Public Works Department actually did to improve the outlet for a stormwater basin, and on the right, these are the same 2 pictures, of before and after. We had an area where a wetland was outletting and it was causing significant erosion because of not having downstream prevention, and we were able to go stabilize that area to improve the water quality. So you can imagine all the sediment that was on that hill washed away somewhere, and making these improvements helps retain that soil in place. This is a cool project. This was done in 2021 and 2022 in Ridge Creek Park. Essentially, this is the Prior Lake outlet. So this is where Prior Lake drains their outlet water through the city of Shakopee to the Minnesota River. We actually re-meandered the creek and added pedestrian walkways, boardwalks, to really experience the natural resources. This was a really collaborative project. We actually got 3 grants from DNR, from the Prior Lake Outlet Channel Consortium and the Lower Min Watershed District to construct these improvements, and it was one that I think our staff's really proud of. And also, these are some of our interns that were doing some of those MS4 inspections that were required to meet from the permit, and also ash tree inspections, which I will get into. I want to touch on a couple stats. So this year, our interns completed 82 inspections on stormwater management basins. They identified that 35 required maintenance. They inspected 71 structural BMPs, which are essentially sumps and water quality manholes that help collect some of the runoff within the roadway before it goes to our natural resources. They identified that 12 required maintenance, and they performed 103 outfall inspections, which is essentially where a pond discharges, and they identified that 10 required maintenance. Now, why is that important? It's important because then we can prioritize funding and look at future projects to make sure that we can maintain those resources. So getting all those inspections done allows us to accurately budget for the future. Ash trees, this is an important topic. Right now we have 1,048 ash trees to the tree. We actually inventory every single ash tree within the city and every single tree, and those are on our city maps. We have a tree layer that shows every single tree. We are currently treating 553 trees for emerald ash borer disease, and there's 495 that we're not treating. Of those 1,048 trees, 822 are healthy, 7 have confirmed EAB, and 240 are declining in health. So those are the trees that we're looking to target to treat and also prioritize for future removals. Again, doing all these inspections and collecting this data helps us prioritize funding for projects so we know what exactly we need to spend and how we need to allocate those resources.
Are these all city-owned trees?
These are city-owned trees that are within city property or within the right-of-way. These are not on private residences.
Okay.
That's a great question. And then tree pruning and ash tree removal. These are some cool project or pictures that just show some of the ways that we're actually making our right-of-way safe, and if we do have an ash tree, trying to cut those down and manage those. Right now, we've identified 56 ash trees that are going to be removed in 2024 this winter. Moving on, I'd like to highlight current projects that we're doing throughout this year. This is our 169 pedestrian bridge. This was a picture that we took last year with our drone that Ryan Borman, our GIS staff, was able to go out and collect. I will show you a video here, which I think is really cool. This is us flying over the bridge, starting on the north side of the bridge. You can see the retaining wall where the trail is going to go right up to the bridge. All the bridge piers and beams are in place. If you've driven 169, you can see that they've been placing the decking over the last couple weeks, which is all the wood that's going up over the bridge. Next week, Friday, we are going to be pouring the bridge deck. So that'll require roadway closures of 169 that we're working on detours with the county and the state on. It's really scary being up this high, and especially looking at the cranes, but you can see our contractors, they're tied off safely, and they're actually working on the bridge decking right over the roadway, which I'm afraid of heights. So it's interesting to watch them and not be fearless when they're doing it. But this is really cool. That's the Prior Lake outlet, so you can see all the different infrastructure that's in place right in this area, and how this pedestrian bridge and trail is going to connect the community from the south side of 169 and open that up to the north side.
Do you have the ability to back this up?
I can, maybe. Yes, where would you like to see?
The outlet channel on the south side of the highway.
Oh, I wish I could.
Yeah, just let her go forward. I'll point it out.
Okay, sorry. Takes a minute.
Yep. There's a important point here.
Yes.
That just dawned on me when I saw it.
An old car in there, right?
Pardon me?
Something down under the water there, you saw?
No. But if council recalls, we had a citizen in that was concerned about the green algae growth in a pond by their residents.
That's true.
And what I'm going to point out here, and I just saw it, keep going.
Yep.
The green of this outlet channel is consistent with the pond that gentleman was concerned about. So that kind of tells me that pond is not a one-off.
It's actually consistent with the majority of our ponds this time of the year, Mayor.
Right, and that's kind of what this is telling me.
And this is an outlet channel, so this is water that, if it doesn't rain, this water doesn't move. It's not flowing, so you have stagnant water here that's not continuing downstream, which is why you're seeing those algae blooms. Next project is our 2023 street improvement project. This was spread all throughout town. It consisted of milling and overlaying of roadways and also reclaiming, which is essentially turning the asphalt back into gravel and repaving the road fully. Our project included Atwood Street in downtown, the DePinion Hills neighborhood, a road entrance into Valley Fair, roadways just east of Southbridge that they're working on right now, the Countryside neighborhood by the high school in Westchester, and also Valley View Road west of 83. It was a large project. They're just finishing up and they'll be done towards the end of the month in September.
Trivia question, the house on the left, flat roof, whose was that?
Doctor,
It was a doctor.
a dentist maybe. Holmes, Hill.
We'll have to look into that.
Into it. Next is another really cool project. This is the Lions Park Pickleball Court. This was right after they paved. We haven't painted the pickleball courts, and you may be asking why. It takes about 1 month after we pave it to be able to actually paint it, to get the paint to adhere. That's going to be done within the next couple weeks here. The fence is already up, so if you go take a look at it, it kind of looks like a pickleball court now, outside from the green and blue colors that'll be finished up here. That project will be done within a month. This is a county-led project. This is the traffic signal at Fuller Street and 17th Avenue. Contractors are working right now to get the traffic signal poles up. This project will be done towards the end of September. There was some delays on procurement of some electrical materials. Otherwise, it would have been done by the time of school is up, but the county is actively working on it, and that'll be a massive safety improvement for the area to be able to allow residents to go north and south across 17th Avenue.
Alex, I know we've heard a lot of complaints from the community about the speeds coming into town on Fuller at the Veerling stop sign by the community center. So this is basically going to kind of break that section up. So the question I have is, what's the speed between 17th Avenue and Veerling going to be, or what is it? And is it going to change? Is it?
So I don't know the speed limit off the top of my head. I can give you that answer tonight, but it's not proposed to change.
Okay.
The city can't artificially reestablish speed limits. That's only set by the state of, or the Department of Transportation.
Yep.
We haven't requested a speed study. However, we can monitor that when the signal's in place to see what the after speeds are.
Yeah, we'd have to do a warrant study on it. Okay.
The next two projects are sanitary sewer projects. I promise I won't show gross pictures. This is a really cool project. This is on the west end of town in the Lower Bluff area, just south of 169, just east of County Road 69. Essentially, this area was not able to be served by gravity sanitary sewer. So we constructed 5,000 linear feet of force main and 3 giant pumps in a sanitary sewer wet well to be able to provide service to the River Valley Business Park, which is the development that's going up west of County Road 69. That project would have only been able to be served by sewer by these lift stations. So this is a collaborative project between community development and engineering to say, we want to develop this area, how can we do it? Anything is possible as long as we can spend the money. This is a pretty significant project that's going to open up this area for development. And that project is essentially complete. It should be operational within a month. This is another lift station that we did. On the right is the lift station. It's the cleanest lift station you'll ever see. That's the wet well where the pumps are going to go. That's essentially right before we started up the lift station. The picture on the left, I think, is really cool because it highlights all the collaboration that is needed to get these lift stations to function. We had a startup a few weeks ago for this to make it operational, and we had staff from 2 of our engineering consultants. We had public works staff there, Spuck was there, and the city's contractor there, and the city's engineering department, all to make sure that everything was functioning correctly and that it's operational so that when we do turn the pumps on and businesses can connect, that system works. This also was a really important project at Marison Hanson, which is east of Home Depot on the east city limits, because there are failing septic systems for these commercial businesses in the area, and this provides them access to a gravity sewer system to replace those septic tanks.
So the picture on the right, explain to us how that functions.
So essentially, this is one of the wet wells where the sewer would come into this area and our pumps will sit. And then as the pumps are submersible, so they're submersed below an established point within the sewer system, and those pumps kick on when the sewage gets to a certain level, pumps it out to a dry well, and goes to a force main, which is a piped connection, so it's not gravity, so it pushes the sewage through until we can get to a low area to actually gravity flow. And then from a development project, this is Highview Park. This is on the southwest end of town, south of County Road 78 by Zumbro Avenue. This was a project that just started grading. If you've driven on the area, kind of on the outskirts of town, they just started grading this development that D.R. Horton is developing. And they're actually having a pre-construction meeting to start pipe work next week. So hopefully we'll get some roads in still this fall. Going through some planned improvements for projects. These are projects that are included in the draft CIP. They haven't been approved by council yet, but they're projects that we are planning for in the future, and you will see them as we move them forward. The first is downtown lighting and sidewalk replacement. Two pictures on the left are some of the light pole examples that we see downtown if you walk around. The picture on the left is clearly a trip hazard. Someone can get their foot caught in there, and it's a safety issue. All of our brick pavers are settling adjacent to the curb and the light poles, and the picture in the middle, you can see the bases are completely falling apart. So the picture on the right is what we're looking to actually construct downtown with the consistent light poles, new sidewalk. That's a landscape improvement project, but also a safety project for downtown. We're planning to construct this improvement project in year increments. So we're gonna construct it essentially block by block for about 4 years is what we're proposing.
Are we gonna move away from the pavers that settle like this over time to something more long-term?
That's correct. So you can see on the picture on the right, you don't see the pavers along the curb and gutter. It's just sidewalk. So the plan would be with this project is to completely replace those pavers and just have a sidewalk connection. The pavers are nice and a landscape amenity. However, they do settle along the curb and require additional maintenance. Next two projects, the one on the left is the proposed roundabout at Eagle Creek and Veerling Drive. This is a project that would be constructed in 2024. It replaces the all-way stop controlled intersection, which is it's somewhat of a challenge from a safety perspective. People run that always stop, and you also have 2 lanes in each direction, which makes it confusing when all these cars are coming together at the same time and no one knows when to go. This project is funded by the TIF for the area in Canterbury Park. It's really there to get traffic in and out of Canterbury safely and efficiently, especially for larger events, and it also will function for day-to-day traffic in a safe condition. Project on the right, this was a picture that Bill Delaney actually took from the Community Development Department. He was out in a kayak and got some pictures of the riverbank eroding, especially with the river so low. This is our riverbank stabilization project, which we're just starting. That engineering design, we don't exactly know what we're gonna build, but that'll be coming before council several times as we start moving forward with that engineering. But we do know that the river is an issue that needs to be stabilized, and we also need to protect our sanitary sewer systems along the river. Next two projects, project on the left is Stagecoach Road. This is essentially a carryover project that continues from the Stagecoach Roundabout by Highway 101 by Henches Avenue. That project just finished up a couple of years ago. Essentially, we're looking to build a pedestrian trail to continue on from that roundabout all the way to the east across the UP rail tracks under 169 and connect to the Marison-Hanson area along 13th Avenue. That trail is a needed trail connection from our pedestrian system. It'll connect a lot of the residential area to get to the trails along the river. And that would be programmed for 2025. And next, we are working with Scott County and D.R. Horton to construct a pedestrian underpass under County Road 78, which is just west of Zumbro Avenue.
Where's the roundabout on Stagecoach on this drawing?
Sorry, it's in the green dot in the top left.
I'm trying to picture in my mind where actually on that road is it?
The 101 traffic signal with Stagecoach. If you go south from 101, there's a roundabout right where SM Henches' facility is there. That project we just finished a couple years ago.
So that's an existing one.
That's an existing roundabout. Essentially, we're just carrying the roadway and trail connections. And the pedestrian tunnel would be essentially a pedestrian improvement to get pedestrians from the north side to the south side, where we're proposing a park in the Highview Park neighborhood and connect the new residential developments with not needing to go across County Road 78. And that's a project we're working with Scott County and D.R. Horton on.
Do the trails actually need to be 10 feet wide?
Along the county road they do, because that's what the county tells us to do. Along city streets, we construct 8-foot wide pedestrian trails. That is a county typical section for their trail system.
Well, if our policy is 8 feet, theirs is 10, we should pay for 8 and then whatever, and they should kick into 2.
9, negotiate.
They should kick into 2.
We split those trails 50-50, which is county policy. It's obviously something open for discussion, but that is historically how we handled
They
those
have
trail
some reasoning
connections.
behind it. It may have some
Something to do with finance.
ADA or something, I don't know.
10 feet is pretty wide for a.
And the last project I'll highlight is the Marystown Road Corridor Improvements, which is a project we're looking at for 2025 and 2026. I know there's a lot of history on this project, which I'm still getting up to speed on. Essentially, what it would do is replace the off-ramps with single-lane roundabouts at 169 Marystown Road, and then replace the four-way stop at Veerling Drive with a single-lane roundabout as well. The city did receive $3.7 million in federal funding for a pedestrian safety and highway safety improvement. We are looking at other funding sources as well and different grant opportunities leading up to this project, but it is one that we need to start designing to be able to take advantage of those federal funds. So that's a project that we'll be looking at kicking off the engineering towards the end of the year here.
So the red, I'm gonna pick on the middle roundabout.
Go for it.
here. The red, and I'm kind of looking at the on and off ramp of 169 where it ties in. Is that red gonna be a wall or just a curb?
So the big red curve that goes into Tapa Park, is that what you're looking at?
Other side.
On the south side. So the red refers to a concrete median. So that's the area in between the road. The yellow refers to the actual pavement of
Right.
the road. The red is that concrete median that would divide the two sections of road.
Right, but my concern is currently you have an on and off ramp
Yep.
side by side. One mistake there is catastrophic. If somebody takes the wrong ramp down, right, they're gonna be going the wrong direction down the ramp. And they're gonna be heading into oncoming traffic. And that's always been a bad place, especially when I drive a motorcycle. I go past that and it's like, you got the left going on and you got the lefts coming off.
They're going to,
This little section right here between them on-off ramps, where it ties into the roundabout, we almost need a taller separation there than a standard.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Obviously, the center island will have raised curbs and we'll have signage within there, but that's something we can bring up to MnDOT. They'll be the ones ultimately looking at the design section and making those decisions. We need to meet their standards because this is our off-ramp. The nice component to this is because it's a roundabout, typically those angles of access into the roundabouts and off-ramps should be able to guide people to the right road. You would have to go around the lane and curve back behind you to get on the off-ramp.
You drive in today's society, right?
I can do it.
I'm also an optimist that hoping people get the idea of driving roundabouts these days.
And a
but
stop signs couldn't be more straightforward.
That's very true.
They're just an inconvenience for many.
This project, I think, brought up the most talk at Night and Night and concerns and thoughts about this project. But we have put a lot of thought into it, and it is right now real dangerous for folks to come across, and we're developing that whole other side now, so a lot more folks want to come across. So, and traffic coming out of Hy-Vee's always been an issue, so this should fix it. So.
Yeah, and this will be a collaborative effort. We will engage the public on this project to ensure that we're meeting expectations and gathering a lot of that feedback so the public knows exactly what to expect when we do make those improvements and we can get that feedback from them.
Well, thank you.
Last couple projects as a highlight is we are working on some roadways in Canterbury Park to provide access to the amphitheater. That roadway and those improvements would be constructed next year. There's also additional intersection improvements throughout the city. The County Road 101 Shenandoah Drive traffic signal is one that's tied to that amphitheater project as well. That would be constructed next year. The county's constructing a single lane roundabout at County Road 69 and 78 next year. And we're working with developers on potentially extending County Road 16th or 17th Avenue all the way west to County Road 69. That would be development driven. That wouldn't be from a city initiative standpoint. The county is also looking at improvements to other county roads like County Road 17 on the east end of town going into the city of Savage. Our Water Resources Department is looking at adding a downtown stormwater chamber, which is essentially a water quality improvement, a big manhole that goes under the parking lot at 17th Avenue and 2nd Avenue and Lewis Street. That's a project that we needed to replace the parking lot, so we're taking advantage of taking out the pavement and adding stormwater management and treatment prior to discharge into the Minnesota River. So that's a collaborative project between our department. And we also have a sanitary, go ahead.
Beware of bedrock.
Correct. We are taking borings to verify where the bedrock is. That's going to help influence that design. Yes, that is an integral part of the city that I didn't touch on this. And lastly, is sanitary sewer improvements, lift station improvements, which was on the agenda tonight from a design perspective, lining our sanitary sewers, which I know we talked about at the last meeting, and then also a SCADA system, which is essentially providing supervisory control and data acquisition. So we monitor our levels of our lift stations to ensure if there's a failure, we know in real time, so we can adequately go out and maintain those systems so that we don't have failures.
Do we have a backup pump in case we need it, like a truck pump or something?
Yeah, so in a lot of our lift stations, we're putting 2 pumps in, and we're running one operationally, and then we have a backup pump from a future perspective, but also that can be used in case the first pump fails. Lastly, I'll share my favorite quote: "The road to success is always under construction," which is great from an engineering perspective because we're always trying to make improvements, but at the end of the line, we know that you can't make an omelet without cracking some eggs, and there's going to be some issues along the way, but at the end of the day, it's always going to be something that we can stand behind and be proud of. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll stand for questions if there are any.
Any questions
I
from
wrote
council?
one down, it was, but you answered it about what your summer interns do, so you showed some good pictures.
Yeah.
So thank you.
And there's a lot of other things they do too, but yeah, I was able to highlight those.
I have another question. You talked about the watershed district's different standards. Is that because they're under different requirements, or are they just not standardized to a point where they're asking the same questions?
Everyone has their own, everyone's picky, I guess I'd say, so they like things certain ways. For the most part, stormwater design is all similar, but they have different rates that we can discharge to, so we can only, allow so much water at a peak of time. Also, they have water quality standards, so if you do it in a project, they want X amount of treatment. Every watershed's different, and it's kind of personal preference.
So they're looking for the suspended solids or pH
Yeah,
and all those
different
different
goals.
things that they're looking for?
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions from council?
Thank you.
Well, that's quite the presentation for 2 months on the job. Is your head done spinning yet, sir?
Spinning.
Thanks for your team showing up, or some of them.
Okay, item 8B, review of 2024 preliminary budget and levy. And Finance Director, Mr. Reinhardt.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Tonight we have a budget work session to discuss the 2024 preliminary levy and budget. I'll start with a disclaimer. There's still very early in the process, so a lot of unknown numbers, and still adjusting as more information is received. We don't have insurance rates. There's union negotiations. We don't have the fiscal disparities contribution number. There's a number of agreement revisions, expenditures and revenue estimates, and market value numbers that are still preliminary. But this presentation tonight can at least provide you an idea of where we're at today and get council direction. You may have seen this slide before, but these continue to be our overlying financial objectives, which would include being one of the lowest tax communities in the metro, continue to grow our tax capacity of new and existing property, and achieve the city council adopted strategic priorities. We'll continue to be transparent and make decisions with the long-term future in mind to ensure the city's ongoing ability to provide quality services at a reasonable price. And then as we go through the budget process, information will be posted on our website. So being as transparent and as informative as possible. We'll still have our city property taxpayer receipt out there on our website for 2013 taxes if anybody's interested in looking at that. So Shakopee continues to remain extremely strong, in an extremely strong financial position. The city's AA long-term credit rating reflects the rapid growing local economy, strong reserves, manageable debt burden, and strong financial management practices and policies that we have in place. The city has a very diverse property tax base across all sectors, including entertainment, industrial, commercial, and a range of housing options. We've placed an emphasis on long-term financial planning, which includes our long-term financial plan, our capital improvement plan, and our corresponding 15-year capital improvement plan. One of the key contributors to our city's financial strength was the establishment of our internal service funds several years ago. These funds account for our equipment, buildings, park assets, and information technology, infrastructure, and equipment. The philosophy behind these is they take out the large swings from year to year on the tax levy by charging rents on an annual basis or level rents on an annual basis. So when replacement of the equipment and future infrastructure is needed, we have the money set aside to replace those. Lots of changes at the state legislative level, which will impact not only this budget, but upcoming budgets in a number of different ways. There's a number of, I should say, a record number of bills introduced at the state legislature or passed. As a result, a number of new laws that impact the city in different ways have been passed, and we're still working out the details of exactly how it'll impact the city's operations and finances as we go forward. And I would also say that it certainly impact, not only the financial piece of the budget, but also how we, also operations, and then there's certainly initiatives kind of coincide with those legislative changes as well. So these changes that I have listed here, not all encompassing, but I've put a number of them on the next few slides here. So starting with employment changes, Paid Family and Medical Leave Act, employees would be eligible for up to 20 weeks of leave annually. This would require a 0.7% payroll tax for all employers. Half of that could be charged to employees beginning in 1/1/2026. It does appear there will be an application process for exemption from the premium tax if the city does have a plan that's equal or greater than what's offered under the state plan. Earned sick and safe time, which is effective January 1st, 2024, requires that all employees earn 1 hour of sick time for every 30 hours worked. And this includes all employees, so this would also include elected officials. Oops. So I got off the page here. And then the last one there is the local government compensation cap and waiver process has been repealed effective of May 25th, 2023. For elections, effective for the 2024 general elections, early voting replaces direct balloting with true early voting for the 18 days leading up to election. Early voting hours would include, as required by the state, until 7 p.m. on Tuesday before the election, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on 2 Saturdays before the election, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Sunday immediately before the election, and until 5 p.m. the day before the election. And then housing, $1 billion housing bill was passed, which includes significant increases in one-time funding for existing and new programs. There is a 0.25% metro sales tax that'll be distributed in metro cities greater than 10,000 in population. The estimated amount for Shakopee is $374,000 a year.
Quick question. What is safe time?
So sick and safe time, so in the case of what I believe it's domestic violence, if there's an issue related to that or something similar, you would be able to use this time accordingly. It also is part of that provision which is different than what it is now, if you have like a snowstorm and your kids get out of school, early release, that would also fall under this. So it's a lot broader than what sick time covers currently.
If you don't feel safe driving to work.
Or leaving your kids home alone.
True. Yep.
Thank you.
I have more slides on legislative impacts. Yeah, I've done this presentation before where I've started with state law changes, and I've never had more than one slide, and I've always known all the details specifically because I've read through them numerous times, but there's just so many changes this time around that it's more than one slide. So cannabis, which I know we've had a work session the last city council meeting. I think the infographic here is kind of helpful as far as what our role would be as part of that process. So the city would be issuing registrations. We'd decide on whether or not there'd be zoning changes. We'd be responsible for the compliance checks, and then the tax that's collected, we would receive 10% of the tax revenue that's collected. Property taxes and aid, there were updates to the LGA formula and an increase of 80 million of the appropriation. Again, the city of Shakopee is not a recipient of LGA. Ongoing increases to really a number of either ongoing or new related to property tax credits. The homestead market value exclusion, which is not effective until property taxes payable in 2025, but that'll increase from 417,000 to 517,000, which for those who were around when they first implemented a market value exclusion, what it does is it basically shifts the property taxes to those that don't qualify for the exclusion. So you can expect that as part of the discussion in 2025. Reduction in 4D low-income rental housing property tax classification rate. There's also a 2-year aid to help with the transition for cities that are most impacted by that. Reenactment of the historic structure rehab credit. And then they passed a 2-year moratorium on local sales tax requests, which will allow them time to evaluate sales tax requests going forward in that process. And then it also removes the supplemental information that was provided in the Truth in Taxation notice. If you recall, last year we had to add, here's what the changes are based on revenue class and expenditure class. Last year we had to add that. This year it's no longer required. So you won't see that in the Truth in Taxation notice.
So we're not going to put that extra information into it?
That is correct. Yep, and you're only allowed, actually, I take that back. So there's a format, prescribed format for that Truth in Taxation notice. Every person in the state of Minnesota, whether you live in Shakopee or someplace up north, you're receiving roughly the same formatted statement. They do allow certain, a one-pager that you can do with certain things that you're allowed to put in it, which we have not done in the past, but this requirement will go away, and I don't anticipate including that information.
Can we get an example of what information that we supplied last year, implemented last year, that is no longer going to be supplied?
Yeah, I can provide that to you, or you can look at last year's.
I mean, if it's really good
Yep.
information to put out to the property taxpayers, we should probably keep providing it.
Yeah, but here's what I saw as the issue with that last year is the way they have it classified is the way that they have us report it to the state, and that doesn't necessarily mean anything to the property owner. So when the property owner sees it and they see, hey, what you're paying in for highways last year was this amount. This year it's way down. Well, it's because we didn't have the same level of construction projects we did. But for the resident, because I got a couple of comments on this, they said to me, well, why aren't you spending as much as you used to on roads and streets? Well, we are on the maintenance section. It just depends on which projects are in there. So it really comes down to it not being categorized in a way that a normal person would understand.
I was trying to say it was not helpful information.
Created more questions than
So
answers.
basically, the same information is available by looking at the capital improvement plan.
And there's definitely a lot more detail than a one-pager would be, and it would make a lot more sense if you were to look at it. And to me, that's the glorious part of the property taxpayer receipt that we have on our website. If you're interested in how your money's being spent, you can see in a detailed version. You don't have to look at something that doesn't make any sense and isn't in a format that you don't know what it means, in my opinion.
Good point. It was not helpful, and frankly, it wasn't transparent because all it did was confuse people. And, you know, the whole point of transparency is to try to be understandable. If you're putting information out, it's critical that people have the ability to understand that information.
So it's a stop sign, basically.
So if we all speak English and we're putting something out in Russian, it doesn't make sense. And, you know, that's kind of what I tell staff all the time. We have to be able to speak and talk in a language where people understand us, or that's not true transparency.
All right, let's double talk.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the concept is the concept of, hey, let's let people know how their money's being spent is, I think, the thought behind that, but if you look at what I actually put together, I don't think it tells you. Yeah. Moving on to transportation. Established a fund called the Larger Cities Assistance Account, which is funded through additional taxes, one of them being a 50-cent delivery tax. I think it's on deliveries of over $100 from things like Amazon or wherever it might be. The estimated revenue, these are all based on tax revenues provided by the league, but about 17,000 in 2024, about 118,000 in 2025. And then 18 million each for a local road improvement and local bridge program, 0.75 cent metro sales tax for transit and county roads, and then some increases in license tab fees, motor vehicle sales tax, and gas tax, and those are indexed for inflation.
Why such a big difference in the estimated city revenue for the large city assistant account?
For 2024,
Yep,
2025.
I believe that tax begins being collected in,
Later in the year.
I think some of the taxes are phased in, so it all becomes, it's based on timing, so I believe.
So that must start late in '24 or something.
Yeah, I believe there's a handful of different taxes, and some of them are implemented July 1st of 2024, for example.
All right.
This is an estimate. This sounds like it could be a lot more than that too, if we got a lot of shoppers in town. Or is it based on
So
How is that based?
the larger cities account, so that isn't sales tax. So
Oh.
that's separate, two separate things. So that is these other taxes such as a delivery fee on an Amazon package being delivered to your house that's over $100, and then I wish I knew a couple of the other examples. I don't, so I'm not going to stay. And where the metro sales tax at 0.75, so that's going to county, and that's going to Metro Transit. So Metro Transit type items.
Yes, not MBTA.
I can tell you, all these taxes are certainly going to hurt the households and businesses.
And then on the public safety side, some things are good news, some things are bad news, depending on how you look at it, right? But one-time public safety aid, which is $210 million in aid to cities based on population. City of Shakopee will be recipient of $1,995,000, and we're set to receive that by the end of the year. This, since it'll be received this year, but spent in future years, because it's expected we'd receive it in December, we'll set it aside in its own separate fund, which will allow us to, spend money in future years. The current proposed uses, and you'll see that in an upcoming slide here too, but 2 patrol officers, marked squad car for those patrol officers, replacement of squad and body-worn cameras, which was approved, I believe, at last council meeting. Fire Station 1 renovation, which the study was approved for that. And then tonight, not included in here, but was the fire department, master planning study that was on the agenda. Then Cadillac converter theft law, so penalties for possession. And then the public safety PTSD duty disability bill, which provides full state funding for continued health insurance benefit. Mental injury prevention training is now required for pre-service and in-service, and then no duty disability benefits through PRA unless there's 24 weeks of treatment that has been completed. There's a few things that impact PRA. So a reduction in the assumed rate of investments from 7% to 7.5%. There was some direct aid, and then PRA general plan, the full vesting period changed from 5 to 3 years. Other would be open meeting law, which authorized officials to participate via interactive technology up to 3 times a year for personal or family medical reasons. $15 million in relief urban forestry program, I think primarily for emerald ash borer. And then on the bonding, which I'm sure you've heard about, but statewide there's $1.5 billion in bonding, $850 million in cash. Those projects would include the Scott County Merriam Junction Trail, Scott County Public Water Access Improvement. For the city of Shakopee, it's the riverbank stabilization. And then also located in Shakopee is Department of Corrections space addition and interior renovation. That is it.
So Nate is through half of his presentation, and you've just heard all of the legislative impacts of this last session, half of which have economic impacts that we are not sure of yet. So that's significant.
Okay, moving right along. So now to get into kind of our numbers here, but city's taxable market value is at $7.79 billion, which is an increase of $574 million or 8% from last year. These are all preliminary numbers. They'll change by the end of the year slightly as we get updated numbers from the county. But apartment, commercial, and industrial market value grew at the fastest rate. New construction accounted for $182.9 million of the increase. And then since 2018, we've seen taxable market value increase in the city by about $3.5 billion or 80%. When viewing property values by property value changes by property type, in the past year, we've seen a reversal of what had happened when we were talking at this time last year. If you recall, we saw residential increase at a faster rate than commercial and industrial, which caused kind of a shift in the property tax burden from those properties onto residential. As a result, homeowners saw their property taxes increase this year for 2023. Looking at preliminary assessment data for this year's budget cycle, almost the exact opposite has occurred. Taxable market value for commercial and industrial increased by 13.9% and 26.3% respectively, whereas residential taxable value has seen a small decrease in value, which reverses that shift of that property tax burden. And when I was looking over my notes, I wish I had added another slide on this, but I'm just going verbally tell you this. But residential taxable market value for existing properties, so not including, so if you take out the new construction, we would have seen about a 0.9% decrease in existing values. Changes in value of the existing residential property taxes were minimal, with only 2% of those residential properties that saw greater than a 5% increase. 10% of property, and 10% of the properties that exceeded a decrease greater than 5%. So if you think about how, the outliers are relatively small. So of the existing homes, 83% had no change or a decrease of basically less than 10% in their assessed value. So,
Question for you.
Sure.
So if I caught what you said correctly, you said that the 0.9% for residential is residential, not including new construction.
Yeah, so if you pulled out the new construction, you would have saw year-over-year residential market values in total decrease by 0.9%.
Okay, and then at the bottom of this slide, new construction accounts for 29.3% of increase. 29.3% of what?
Of that 8% increase. So of that 8% increase in market value, 29% of that is going to be related to new construction.
New construction.
Okay, because this says 0.9 for residential, but the total 8%. Oh, I see, you're taking the 8% increase of the 7 million.
Yeah.
29.3 is of the 7.7, well, 7.8 million.
Mm-hmm.
Billion.
Yeah, and I misstated that earlier too, so taxable market value of residential increased by 0.9%, but if you were to take out the new construction within the residential, it would have seen a decrease. I don't have the actual percent that would be.
And that's 7.8 billion, I believe. I think I had that wrong.
It's billion, yeah. Nate, I have a question. What's other? Can you give a couple examples of other?
I'll get back to you on that one too. Yeah, I'll just get back to you on that and get the actual breakdown. I had it on a different slide.
I think those are like churches and school, and if I remember correctly. Yeah.
This would be taxable market value, so it would have to be somebody who's paying
you're right,
taxes.
yep.
Yeah. I think it could be personal property, but let me double check and I'll report back to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, what's funny is I've always made sure I split that out because it's five or six different categories, and this time I didn't write it on my sheet because usually I always anticipate that question.
Councilor Lara, it's probably the property owned by the other guy in the tax bill statement too. The guy that's on a beach somewhere with a Mai Tai.
Yeah.
In this percent.
So tax capacity, city levies a flat dollar for taxes, which is spread against all taxable properties in proportion to their percentage of the total tax capacity of the city. Residential represents 46.6% of the city's tax capacity. In comparison to last year, this is approximately 4.6% less of total tax capacity than in 2023. So this chart is in percentages, but if you want to think of it in dollar terms, it works out approximately the same way. So for every dollar the city requests on our levy, for 2023, residential properties paid 51 cents of every dollar, and in 2024, it'll be about 47 cents of every dollar. The preliminary city levy is currently at $25,473,000, which is an increase of $1,581,000 or 6.62% over last year. And our preliminary EDA levy is $500,000, which is flat from the previous year. We are proposing to continue the $700,000 capital improvement levy. Then I'll touch base on abatement and debt service levy later in this presentation, but we're anticipating decreases in both those levies. And then just a reminder, the preliminary levy is the maximum city levy, which needs to be set by September 30th. And then after that, it can be less, but it cannot be more. And then for context, a 1% levy increase, decrease amounts to about $239,000 in funding. Here's a summary of changes impacting the 2024 preliminary levy. All of these I'll touch on in more detail, but I've categorized these a little bit differently than I have in the past, but I think as I go through them, it'll make sense to you. Obviously, there's many different ways you can categorize the expenditures and the revenues. Net change in the tax levy from last year, again, is $1,581,000. Overall, the city is anticipating a net increase in non-property tax revenues of $932,000. This would include the use of $211,000 of public safety funds that would offset the cost of 2 patrol officers. An anticipated increase in revenues from the pilot agreement with the Shakopee Public Utilities. The city does receive 5.5% of total revenues from the utilities. A tax abatement levy is required for all city-approved tax abatements. Effectively, the city increases the levy in the amount equivalent to the increases in taxes paid for a specific project, as long as that meets the city's business subsidy policy requirements, which could include job-related goals and wages. The levy will be reduced for 2024 as a result of Emerson. It'll be their last year, and then the removal of Shutterfly, which no longer is meeting the job requirements of their abatement agreement. The net reduction in the abatement levy is $139,000. We've added Minnesota Department of Public Safety officer grant, which was awarded to us, which pays for the salary of an officer that is dedicated to impaired driving. We've kept building permit revenues relatively flat, but we did increase that by $80,000. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention we did increase community center and sand venture revenue projections for 2024. Moving on to the expenditure changes, like most other cities, operational costs are being primarily driven by personnel, which represents about half of our current increase on the expenditure side. Wages and benefits make up about 70% of the city's general fund budget. The city has 3 unions, which is patrol, sergeants, and public works. All 3 union contracts are up for negotiation for 2024. The preliminary 2024 budget is built on the assumption that union and non-union wages will see an equivalent 3% cost of living adjustment. And then across all those employee groups, the cost of living adjustment amounts to approximately $508,000. The city is anticipating health insurance rate will be increased about 30% for 2024. The budget anticipates that being split 50-50 with city and the employee contribution. That amount would be $274,000. The previous year, we did see a slight decrease in premiums, but over the past 24 months, we've seen a spike in our utilization rates. And so far, this appears, we're anticipating about a 30% increase based on our discussions with our insurance agent rep. Alternatively, we're exploring self-funding as an option for health insurance, so there will be more to follow as we figure out what those rates will come in at. The city is a member of the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust for property liability, auto and workers' compensation coverage. Our workers' compensation rates have not yet been determined for 2024. We've estimated that as a 5% increase, which is $44,000. 2024 will be a presidential election year, requiring the hiring of election judges. The city will also need to comply with the early voting requirements, which we discussed on that earlier slide. So this will increase the hours significantly. Staff is also proposing a $1 increase in election judge wages. It would go from 14 to 15 for head judges and 11 to 12 for election judges. Net impact of those two changes would be $108,940. The fire department supervisor positions, we added 3 to the 2023 budget to be implemented on July 1st. The 2024 budget would recognize the full year of that net cost increase of $120,000. These positions are currently open today. Park and Recreation have implemented numerous staffing changes over the past couple of years. This includes moving part-time positions to full-time and then changes to various program offerings. Part-time hours have been reevaluated as a result of those changes and have been reduced in the amount of $111,970. And then the city is proposing the following, new staff positions, which would be the two new patrol officers. We have not added officers over the past 5 years. The additional officers are based on the needs of the IACP formula, which is based on department workload. The funding would come from the city's allocation of one-time public safety funds. And then we would anticipate utilizing half of those funds in 2025 as well, so stepping over a 3-year period. A part-time human resource specialist at a cost of $52,000. This position is necessitated by the increase in the hiring processes, legislative changes, insurance and union negotiations, and implementation of new software in 2024. And then that remainder, $30,000, that would be steps, and then as well as new employees coming in, falling into different wage scales than previously, so the net impact of everything else.
Quick question. So how many HR specialists do we have now on staff?
We have the HR director and two full-time HR specialists.
That's 3.
That is 3. Well, 2 specialists and 1 HR director.
Employees,
It's 3.
different titles.
3 total.
But they're currently doing the work of 3.5 people, so. Right, okay, moving on, operational changes. So this I try to split out and see if this makes sense, but into those that would continue into future years. So these would include contractual and utility increases. For electric, motor fuels, and natural gas, if you recall from the budget presentation last year, we did increase that for the 2023 budget. However, we're still tracking behind for those 3 categories and proposing increases for 2024. That fire state aid payment is a pass-through, so you'll see a corresponding increase on the revenue side. And then county prosecution costs, software costs, custodial, and assessing are all contractual cost increases. And then the one new thing would be the annual park bench replacement. We've got a lot of city benches throughout the city in need of replacing, so we're looking at phasing that over a period of time, so replacing a few on an annual basis.
What is assessing audit contracts?
So almost all of that would be related to the assessing contract we have with the county. So they had, I believe, a 3.5% increase in their contract from year to year.
Okay.
Quick question on the software. So for the software, are we having licensing that we follow, or do we have like, we just buy the packages per year, or do we have like a floating license, or?
Well, it's all going to be dependent on, so it all depends on the software, right? So the Logis software, so we kind of, there's a number of different software that we purchase from them. So there's a number of different software that's within it, but licenses, annual support costs, they're both would be in that line item. So as mentioned, the city utilizes internal service funds to accumulate for future replacement of city equipment and facilities. The funding source is annual rents, so what these are basically internal charges for the appropriate departments. Equipment rent increase is both a result of new equipment being added to the schedule, as well as what we talked about the last CIP meeting. We're seeing about a 10% increase year over year on equipment and vehicles. A 20-year equipment replacement schedule is included in the 5-year capital improvement plan that identifies all of our equipment, useful life replacement years, and costs. We have reduced this amount from what was presented in the CIP presentation, but we're proposing a $145,000 increase. Increase in building rent, this is based on the estimated construction cost of Sand Venture. The rents have been adjusted to reflect both the future replacement cost of Sand Venture at the estimated $7 million cost, and then internal borrowing needed to cover the cost of construction. Net impact on all the rent charges combined is about $376,000. Then one-time adjustments. So the general fund up and down swings are typically moderated through the use of those internal service funds, but there are sometimes items outside that. So these costs will not be recurring in future budget. Shakopee is a member of the LOGIS Consortium, which provides technology solutions and support for local government members. Consortium recently completed an 18-month process researching, evaluating, and selecting a new enterprise resource planning system software to replace our current finance and human resources software. The Oracle Cloud ERP system is the provider that they selected. They have guaranteed pricing over the next 10 years, far below what the city could achieve on an individual basis. Oracle Cloud would replace various applications currently used and would be fully integrated HR, payroll, general ledger with built-in workflows for time entry, accounts payable, onboarding, et cetera, budgeting, financial reports, dashboards. The one-time implementation cost covers the additional support to transition and the current software along with the initial buy-in cost of that software. So that's what that $252,000 is. Reduced for elections poll pad tabulators, which will be purchased this year and was a one-time item in the 2023 budget.
What's ERP software?
Enterprise Resource Planning Software.
And who uses that?
So it would encompass both finance and HR software and everything that goes along with that. So budgeting, general ledger, journal entries, printing checks, your whole HR function from posting jobs to hiring to onboarding to payroll.
Literally, everyone uses it. Yeah, it is a foundation for everything that we do.
Is this a one-time cost?
Correct, that would be the one-time cost. So this is the only time you'll see that one-time cost.
And then there's a yearly fee?
There is a yearly fee, but it'll be offset partially by getting rid of our current software, right? So the annual, what we've built in for the annual operating cost in 2024 is $25,600, which is based on the number LOGIS gave us for mid-year implementing. The total operating costs on an annual basis going forward for the next 10 years would be $46,000 more than what we're currently paying.
How much more?
$46,000 more than what we're currently paying.
So we're going to spend, I'm going to round 50,000. We're going to spend $250,000 one time so that we can pay 50,000 more every year moving forward.
That's correct.
Correct.
Why would we do that?
Because we're part of the LOGIS system. How many different cities are involved in the LOGIS consortium?
Roughly 30. It depends on.
So we're essentially changing all of the cities, every one of the 30 or so cities are changing their finance and HR foundation platforms. They've been looking at this for about 18 months now, and they've made the call to make this decision. If we were to go out and do this on our own, trust me, the idea of paying $250,000 to implement a system drives me crazy. But the reality is if we tried to do this out on our own, it would cost us a lot more. Because we're doing this with 30 other cities, we are, as much as it pains me to say, getting a deal.
What happens if we just keep what we have?
It eventually will not be functional.
Right, so right now our current software is through LOGIS. So as people migrate to the new, it's all part of a pool share, right? So as people migrate to the new system, our costs will become more and more and more, and eventually they want to sunset that system. So it will no longer be available at some point in time. They've agreed to support it over the time being.
So there's 30 cities in Minnesota that are using this. What's the other billion cities using?
There's various software. I mean,
Software
whether it's Tyler or BSA. I mean, I'm not sure if it necessarily, there's different providers, yes.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
there's other providers, but the reality is that, you know, this is what we use in the consortium, and, you know, frankly, I thought about at one point if we should leave the consortium, but the reality is that that's not cost effective for our taxpayers. It would cost us a lot more to try to do this on our own.
Retrain everybody on a new system.
Well, you're gonna have to do that with the
Get
new system.
retrained,
You will, but this is
There's
already
nothing
supported.
worse than changing your financial system from a internal processes perspective. I've done it once and swore we would never do it again. Logis,
Gonna pay to do it again.
yeah, well, Logis is forcing this change, basically.
Yeah, and I will say a couple of different things. So they probably had 20 different softwares they looked at, and when I say they, it's actually us and all the other cities, right? So we've each city has had a voice on what they wanted to see, and this is the one that came to the number one choice, and it did for a reason. After I've seen the other software demos that were provided to, this would be my choice as well. So I mean, I don't think we're, you know, it's not necessarily being, you know, shoved upon us and we don't want it, because there's many positives that will come with moving into this new system. But.
You fell off at the end. I'm not sure I heard
Oh,
that.
I'm just saying, all the cities that have been involved have been part of this decision to move forward with this as well. It's not just somebody making the decision on our behalf.
Are there any benefits to doing this?
Well,
Fees, easier?
Yeah, I mean, there are a ton of efficiencies and other things that occur with updating the software system. I don't know when our last update was for our current financial system, but this also will integrate a lot of other things as well and will bring a lot of benefit to our HR department in some of the things that they do. Nate and Alyssa both, our finance director and HR director, have been involved in the process from the beginning to make sure that we had our say at the table. It doesn't make it any easier to spend $252,000. Trust me, I'm not a fan of it. Nate and I had many discussions about that topic, and you know, but it is what it is, and if we were to try to do it on our own, it would be a lot more money.
So how many, I guess, functional groups that actually use the software going forward? Is just all the different staffs, or which?
yeah, so it'll be our budgeting software, so anybody who's entering their budgets as a department head, so that'll include them. It'll be all your time cards, so anybody who's getting paid, it will be entering their timesheets through the system in different ways. Anybody who gets hired will go through, you know, when you're applying for a job, it's going right into the system, and it's taken away a lot of the manual processes with the hiring process and having them in two different systems.
Streamlining HR functions, but why are we adding HR functions?
Thank you.
Other impacts, not only from the state, you saw all the legislative changes. Well, somebody has to do that work on the HR side from our end. We've got to figure out how to do that. Currently, our HR staff is, I won't say on the verge of nervous breakdown, but maybe I'm wrong. It's pretty close. They are taxed. I've been putting this off for 2 years now. The original request to come in was for a full-time person. I denied that request, and so I'm bringing a half-time person. I think we can get by with that. I'm hopeful we can. If we can't, I will be back here next year and ask for a full-time person.
See
The
how this
reality is that we
software
have
works out.
looked at this.
See
We
how the software
understand.
works out first and then see where we're at?
I don't think that's I don't
Well, I
think
mean, with the
that'll work.
halftime, you know,
Apples
you've
and
got
apples.
two things going on at the same time. You got new software and a halftime person come on.
And you have to have someone to implement that.
Yep.
And that's why part of what we need the HR halftime staff person for.
Mr. Lara?
I lost my train of thought, so I'll bring it up if I
We'll
come
come
back.
back to you? Okay.
Thank you.
Carry on.
Oh, sure. And then contingencies and placeholders. There's a couple of different placeholders we've kind of put in the budget, which at some point they'll be eliminated or at least reduced as the unknowns become known, right? The preliminary budget includes $150,000 allotment for operating changes within departmental budgets. The operational section that I just went over kind of described the most significant changes. However, between now and September, departments will be adjusting their individual line items. These changes will not exceed the $150,000 allotment. Operational expenditures have been held mostly flat over the past few years. I believe we will have this known by the time you approve it in September. The preliminary budget also includes an additional $300,000 placeholder to account for the legislative impacts as we work our way through those union negotiations and then the insurance estimates. We do not anticipate knowing the exact impacts of these at the time we set the preliminary levy, so we'll likely ask for that to be carried forward in the preliminary budget and hopefully resolved by the time we get to the final budget in December. And then, oh yeah, go ahead.
So when do you plan on implementing this new software?
So we're on the schedule to be implemented September-ish of 2024. So we would be out of the cities they're going in phases with having a smaller, medium, bigger city implement, and they're doing it in phases, and we'd be the third.
So it's $250,000 for the software, and then it's $25,000 for an annual cost. That's just like the annual user fee, your subscription?
Not quite. So so when comparing to what we currently have in our budget, so we're paying for software now. So it'll eliminate the software we're paying for. So it'll be that change in operational cost from what we're currently paying. So it'll be an increase of $25,600 for 2024 above what we're paying now. When you factor out, we're not paying for something we won't be using anymore.
So, but then the next line up is $26,100 for Logis, which is what this new program is supposed to replace. And so they're making us pay a full year to essentially phase that out.
Different softwares are within that one. So it would be, struggling right now, but your assessment software, your network services, so we use them for some of our inner workings of the technology. So I mean, I could provide a further breakdown on what
We're
that.
keeping Logis.
Correct. Yeah. So we would just, so Logis has different softwares that we subscribe to. So the financial and the HR piece, we would be removing some of them that we have with them, and it would be all.
And that would cause our price to decrease then with them? Like,
The net change would be an increase of $25,600.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can, so it sounds like your question's kind of along the lines of there's a couple of different costs in here and what makes up each. I can try to break that down a little bit and report back to you too. And provide you, a little different way to look at it if that helps.
So, again, my question is this a yearly license that we're splitting out like 5 or 10, or is it just one fixed cost per year where everybody gets free access? Are we paying by organizational size, license, or?
Yeah, it'll be organizational size. So we're actually qualify as a medium city, so our cost is actually below what larger cities would pay, and I'm not sure how. I think they kind of based it upon what their current user level is. I'm not quite sure how they decided who's medium, and I'm not going to argue because we would probably be close to the larger size if I were to analyze it. But that's what that one-time fee is based on. And then they have, within that operational cost, how they have it split out is they have, here's the license fee for the software, and then here's what your support would be, and that is also tiered by small, medium, large city.
So if we don't need all the support, say, this year or next year, does that roll off, or do we carry it forward, or?
No, it'd be all encompassing of
So we
everything.
can't.
So we could call them every single day and ask for assistance, and it wouldn't impact how much we're paying.
It's like tech support premium package. If you could use it once a month if you needed to, or you could use it 10 times a week if things are going totally wrong.
One last question. Are we locked into any specific, contract, or can this change for yearly? I mean, if we don't find we need daily tech support, can we roll that down? Or if we don't find we need certain packages, can we roll that down? Or are we?
So that would be kind of decided at more of the overall consortium level, which we would have a voice in. I think I would plan on these costs with the exception of, I believe, so Logis has their kind of overhead cost in there, which would be, they're also providing a level of support. So technically, when you call support, you'd call Logis, and if they can't answer that question, they would go to Oracle and get the assistance there, right? And I think based on how we have our current setup with our current software, I think there's maybe some room within what Logis has that could be reduced. So I possibly is the answer to that question, but nothing would be based on our level of, phone calls or service tickets or something like that.
So let me see if I can break this down and kind of put some closure to this topic. And if any individual council member has more detailed information, by all means, reach out individually to the proper staff person. But I'm just going to see if I sum this up, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this consortium came out with this program, and they said if you're this size, this is your annual cost. If you're middle size, this $252,555 is your annual cost. And if you're large, it's more than that. And then based on your size, category that you fit into, small, medium, large, you have your yearly fee, which I'm assuming the small yearly fee is less than the large user fee, yearly fee, depending on what they currently have and how they subtract what they're currently paying to what the new rates are. Is that a fairly accurate summary?
Different packages, yeah.
Got it?
Yep.
I'm trying to think where I
And
left off.
their package may offer services that we don't technically use, but it's part of the package.
So you're stuck with it.
That you're stuck with it because it's not customizable to each entity.
I think you're at fund balance.
Thank you. Past few years, we've seen some a significant amount of building permit volume. With the larger projects, we may see revenues collected in 1 year, but incur inspections for that project the following year. At the end of the year, the city sets aside a portion of that building permit revenue. Last year, we utilized a portion of that to offset a portion of the revenues to offset the impact on the 2023 budget, which was $126,000. We've eliminated that budget use in 2024, so we've added $126,000 to the levy. The city has set aside $200,000 of year-end 2022 fund balance in the general fund to help offset operating costs with Sand Venture in 2024. This funding provides a little significant safeguard for any unexpected project unknowns and ultimately will lower the impact for 2024. So we added 126 back and took out 200,000, which ultimately will lower
on the 126, Nate.
Yep.
Shouldn't we be adding the same multiplier that we did for the inflationary COLA and other costs like this that the inspecting department is going to be paid, basically, to do the follow-up inspections that go from the end of 23 into 24, which was what the design of that was to begin with?
Let me take a crack at that. I'm not sure I'll be answering your question.
I guess what I'm saying is,
I understood that. But
I'll be cleaner about it. The 126 is the same amount that was transferred last year. Although this 24's costs are going to be higher because of inflation and cost of living increases and healthcare costs and everything else. Why are we not reflecting that in the 126?
Okay, so let me see if this answers your question. So with the 2023 budget, we assumed the use of $126,000 within fund balance for 2023, which ultimately brought the levy down to $126,000. This year, we're not utilizing any of it, so we're trying to move forward to balance the budget, with the exception of we've decided to use $200,000 that we had positive at the end of the year towards the Sand Venture operations. And I think your question is why aren't we using more?
My question is, go ahead.
Yeah, essentially, this is a constant debate between Nate and I. I come from the school that when we get a building fee in and we have a project that lasts over several years, we should be able to allocate that fee through several years. However, technically, that puts us in an unbalanced budget perspective, because what government accounting wants is everything enclosed in one nice little 12-month period, even though everyone realizes that reality. So I wouldn't say we fought, but Nate and I have went back and forth on this several times, and essentially at this point, because of the possibility of some economic issues, we want to be a lot more conservative than we have in the past. So we're pulling that back, and we're making sure that, you know, that the budget itself stands on its own, although I will continue to make the argument that if we have $1 million in December of 2023 that's brought forward, and we're not going to spend a dime of it for our building inspectors until 2024 or 2025, we should be able to carry that revenue forward. But that is not, according to government accounting principles, that would not be a balanced budget.
Yeah, I think effectively we're still doing that. So we have, as one of our policies, we take a look at what we have for building permit revenues in the last 6 months and have a percentage that we set aside within our fund balance. It's called committed for building permit revenue. So in the situation where you actually had, you know, a large amount of building permit revenue in 1 year and the next year you saw nothing, well, that balance you're setting aside is going to decrease, which ultimately would bring funds back into your general fund. So I think effectively we're...
And maybe I'm missing it, but here's how I see it. Always so simple, but it gets difficult. So if you're sending inspectors out to do the inspections in '24 from projects that received building permit funding, which is supposed to go to pay the wages of the people that do the inspections, in '23, you collected the, like Mr. Reynolds says, you collected the money in '23 for the permit. It's supposed to pay for the wages of the people doing the inspections. The inspections are going to be done in '24. You're budgeting the full dollar amount of their labor cost in '24 onto the taxpayers, and the money you collected that should be paying their wages is just sitting there doing nothing.
That would be my argument.
That is exactly the argument, and the whole purpose when we decided to carry this surplus was to pay for the ongoing inspection cost that went over into the next year. That was the discussion we had at this chamber on that topic. So I'm absolutely on the side of not only should we be carrying over the 126 into this budget, but it should be adjusted for inflation and COLA cost increases and healthcare costs, because them are the actual true cost of that service being provided at the time of the service being rendered.
I would say that if I was confident that our building revenues were going to increase as they have the last 4 or 5 years, I would be comfortable making that argument. I think that there's a possibility, now we haven't seen it yet, but there is always that possibility, especially now, that we can't rely upon those building revenues that we could. And so I'm looking to be a little more conservative at this point and pulling that back and wrapping that into the overall budget then as something that is not carried forward then, and we will not then have to make it up, if you will, in a prior or a subsequent budget year. But philosophically, I totally agree with you. That's one of the big debates I think that we've had internally. But I do not want to try to make this up in 25 or 26 if things are going south.
Right.
Let's make it up now. Let's get it to where we need, and you know, it's just a more conservative approach, I think, at this point.
I did have one other question written down. When health insurance costs going up 30%, are we insurance shopping?
We are, and we're also, and as part of that, we're also looking at our internal funding to be internally funded as our own insurance, self-insured, excuse me. Right. And hopefully we'll have more information on that relatively soon.
Yeah, we've had relatively good luck with our rates the past few years.
We have,
Even including last year was basically a flat change. The issue you kind of come across is they give you preliminary numbers and, you know, just speaking to a rep, they kind of give you this picture of, okay, well, it's looking like a 30%, but you don't know until the carrier comes back with their proposal, which ends up being September, October, sometime when it's too late to do anything. But we've always looked at alternative options. So debt service, bonds were issued in 2022, which funded 2022 and 23 projects identified in the capital improvement plan. The required debt service levy for repayment of this bond is $347,556. To offset the increase in debt service levy, last year we transferred $200,000 from the city's local projects fund to the debt service fund, which was part of our 23 budget process. This effect levy would allow the city to kind of step into the annual required debt service levy over a 2-year period. However, earlier this year, City Council approved the setting aside of additional $226,000 of year-end fund balance to help defray that debt service cost an additional year. The only other levy fund debt issue is the 2016 abatement levy, which is for the community center and ice arena. We're proposing no change in that levy. Staff will need council to approve a debt service levy reduction prior to September 30th for both the available balance of both of these debt service funds. If approved, this will effectively result in a net reduction from last year of $26,400 in comparison to the previous year's budget. Just one slide here to touch on the EDA. We do not have a full budget developed for the EDA at this point in time. We intend to bring that forward bring it forward in September. Shakopee EDA has a statute authority to levy a small percentage, which is 0.0185% of the city's taxable market value. In 2024, that maximum amount would be about $1.3 million. The EDA and City Council can set the levy anywhere up to this cap. However, we're not proposing any change for 2024. We're proposing the $500,000 levy. Like I said, we'll have a full budget coming back in September. And then the EDA levy is identified separately on the tax statement from the general, or from the city levy. Personnel in the EDA would include the economic development coordinator and then 50% of the planning and development director. Additional funding is provided through the 0.5% of revenues from the Shakopee Public Utilities Commission. We're anticipating the 2024 budget of $300,000 for that. And then also the EDA serves as a landlord for the main level tenants of the River City Center. That activity, which is the lease revenue and expenditures, we account for as a separate fund of the EDA. So we'll bring those back to you in September.
And that's funded by?
That's funded through the lease revenues of the River City Center.
Okay. So if we're now collecting $300,000, 0.5% of SPUC revenue into the EDA budget or levy?
Correct.
Why would we not reduce the city's levy, EDA levy?
As part of the negotiations with SPUC, SPUC wanted to make a contribution on economic development, but they didn't want to be the ones involved in the process. And so we were essentially made the agreement that that would be brought over to us and we would do that for them on their behalf. So it was never intended to detract from the city's levy. It was an addition. It was an additional SPUC contribution for something above and beyond that.
They wanted that for energy users and water users to help develop an opportunity, if there were one.
Yeah, I just see it going from $500,000 a year to $800,000 a year, and I don't see the need to have that big of an increase. So
it's not an increase, actually. It's the same that it's been for the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't have the 300 prior to that.
We negotiated the SPUC contribution 2 years ago, I believe.
That's what they wanted.
Yeah, so no, it's been there for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
This chart is comparing the city's tax capacity and tax rate over the past 10 years, including the 2024 preliminary levy, again, based on the preliminary assessment value data. The proposed tax levy, as it stands today, would decrease the city's tax rate from 28.585% to 27.323%, which continues the trajectory of decreasing tax rates over the past decade. This chart above, or shown here, provides information on the median value home and city property taxes paid since 2019. The orange bar and the amounts on the left axis represent the median value home. The gray shaded area and the amounts on the right axis is the property tax amount paid on the median value home. Again, median value, if you lined up all the properties from lowest value to highest value, it's the house that falls in the exact middle of values. The value of the median value home decreased from $346,500 to $338,400 over the past year. This is a decrease of $8,100 or 2.6%. For the median value home, this equates to a decrease of $67 or 6.9% annually in property taxes. Absent any change in value, homeowners can expect a tax decrease of $43 or 4.4%. And then for reference, when we talk about a 1% decrease or increase in the city's levy, for 2024, that amounts to about $9 on the median value home. So every 1% you adjust is equivalent to $9.
When the, and I don't recall what the state requirement is. I used to know this. I think it was 30% of the properties have their value done by the assessors. So every 3 years, 100%? Is that right?
Generally, it's every 3 years, yes.
So we're gonna have 2/3 of the properties that are probably not gonna see a reduction in their market value.
No, they would extrapolate that based on sales data. So that they have to actually look at 1/3 of the properties, but they're still using that same sales criteria to
They're
reflect
applying
that
that
across the city.
1/3 snapshot over the whole thing. Is that what you said?
As part of the process of determining the value, they're looking at the value of the homes that have been sold in the community as well as other factors.
Yep.
To get a whole picture of all. But you're right, every 3 years, every property is supposed to have a physical look to make any internal adjustments with that specific property.
But in the meantime, they take that 1/3 that they have within the last 12, 18 months, plus current market conditions, and then they apply that generally over all the properties?
Based on sales data. So it's based on sales market data, and then obviously they're as City Administrator Reynolds mentioned, they're trying to physically look at 1/3 of the properties every year.
That'll let them in the door.
Because they're essentially, they have the overall umbrella, but then they take 1/3 and say, okay, we have to deep dive in these and
Right.
see if there's some increments of difference between each of those properties.
So when we're talking about a 0.9% change in market value increase for residential, is that kind of across the board?
No, and that goes back to I wish I had a slide on this one. So as I mentioned, so it's 0.9% in total residential value increase, but if you take out what was added as new, it's an actual decrease. So most 85% of properties saw, let me grab that again because
So 85% saw a decrease of 8% or something like that, and 29%, which was new development.
yeah, so of the existing homes, 83% had no change or a decrease in assessed value. So right there, that's, 8 out of 10 properties are.
And the others are new that don't have comparables. 29% were new development.
No, this would be of existing.
Right,
So of existing, 83% had no change or a small decrease.
right, and I'm saying 83% to 100% would be that 29% of new development.
No.
27%.
No, I'm talking of existing properties, not bringing in new.
Yep, I get it.
Okay. Then kind kind of show the slide each budget presentation too, but Shakopee is below comparable in surrounding cities when it comes to the cost of comparison of city property taxes, sanitary sewer, and stormwater charges, so the stuff we control at the city level. The following chart provides the 2023 annual cost of services on a $250,000 value home, which is below, the median value home slightly in 2023, and then 5,000 gallons of water usage a month. Staff anticipates proposing rate increases for each of the sewer and the storm funds just to keep up with operational costs. The rate increases will range in 1% to 3% approximately. We'll know more once we kind of dig a little bit deeper into those budgets, but for a typical residential user, that would amount to approximately $5 for sewer and about $1 in surface water charges for the full year. I don't anticipate it being any higher than that based on the preliminary numbers. So based on that, I would not expect that this position in the chart to change, and the total cost of services for a $250,000 value home will decrease in Shakopee for 2024.
And so essentially what we're saying, Nate, is that 968 will come down?
Correct.
So that means that what was in 2023 costing $968 for our average homeowner of a $250,000 home, that will now be less.
Correct.
We don't know where other cities are going to be yet. Or is this
We know that ours will be less.
Ours will be less. That's good, but the others may be more, maybe less. But
yep. So I would have no clue.
they're not going to be close to us.
Obviously, it's based on your property tax rate. It's based on what your charge for those two services would be. And
typically, when do you get the information for the other cities? Is that after all their cycle and their same processes?
I usually people adopt their utility rates as of January 1st. So for the most part, I can get utility rates. Obviously, it won't be till 2024, but early in 2024. And then the property tax rates, they don't become final until mid-March. So
just curious.
I can't even tell you what our rate is for sure until mid-March because that goes through the final adjustments. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. And then just one slide on the budget calendar. Again, come September, we'll be asking for you to adopt the preliminary levy. At that point in time, we cannot increase the levy. It can only decrease through December. The property tax notices that are mailed by the county in November will reflect what's approved at that preliminary levy. And then in December, we'll hold our public hearing and then ask for adoption. So with that, any input or questions that you might have, now would be the time.
Who's first?
First input would be, I think this has come up a couple of times, just the EDA budget with that addition from Spuck. Can we look at reducing that $500K back? Or reducing it?
Yeah, so what the process would be with the EDA is I would bring the budget back to the EDA on September. The first meeting of September would be the goal. The EDA, the Economic Development Authority, which is you guys, could meet and discuss it and then forward your recommendation to City Council. So you'll have a chance to visit that at the next September meeting in more detail when I can provide you the full budget.
And the Spuck edition was specifically pointed at economic development, so that was their contribution, and we don't have any movement on that. That was their
contribution.
Well, we're not asking to lower their contribution.
Right.
Well, essentially, I think you're looking at a zero-sum game, though, because if we reduce our contribution, we're using that contribution to pay some of our salaries, and we would have to take a look at what the overall impact would be, but if we're not using that to EDA funding to pay for the salaries, then it's coming on the property tax levy for the city. So I'm not sure that that's going to achieve anything.
Well, certainly 1.5 salaries doesn't equal $500,000, I hope.
Well, no, but you've got other things that you have the EDA responsible, including River City Center. So we're not going to put a budget together unless there's a need for it. And what we would need to do if you want to decrease the levy, we're going to have to choose what we're going to not do anymore. And if that's, ultimately, that's going to be something that 3 people are going to have to decide what we're not going to do anymore with the EDA.
Okay.
But it's not like it's a pool of money where it's not being utilized. I mean, we'll just simply have to not do something.
And I can just speak from past history too, like from what I've seen, you know, in other places as well as here. I mean, 500,000 doesn't go very far in economic development. So, I mean, the idea of, hey, if we don't spend all 500,000 and having it accumulate over a period of time and then being able to do something bigger, that more substantial, I mean, that's typically what I've seen done with economic development funds. I mean, it doesn't just trickle into the general fund. It ultimately gets set aside for that economic development purpose for whenever you decide there's a project that's worth it.
Go to have a project, have to raise taxes.
Who's next? Anybody? Go ahead.
When do, so all those houses that we're building out in the new part of town, when do those, their taxes start hitting, like affecting our budget and income?
2 years,
That's about the next year.
2 years after they're built?
pretty much.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the exact date. I think they have to be on as of July. The value's got to be on as of July for it to impact the assessment in January for the following year. So what's going on in if there's value as of July of, let's say this year, 2023, you would first see that value come, or the taxes paid in 2025 on that.
That's 18 months. I go 2 years just to be safe.
Yeah.
It's conservative.
I'd do the same for commercial too, wouldn't it pretty much the same? Or?
Correct, yeah.
So we're gonna have a work session, workshop on the budget in September?
Well, based on council direction. So you'll see the EDA come back to the EDA budget being presented to the EDA first week of September, and then I anticipate bringing this back either day in September. It depends on
I'm
how many
sorry,
changes are being
November
made.
work session. It's November, it says.
Well, yeah, so September, you'll have to adopt the preliminary levy by the end of the month, by September 30th.
Well, there's certainly a lot of pressures on everybody out there, not of our doing, but federal inflation and high carrying cost interest rates and state taxes, and I don't think they missed any taxes. They even came up with some new ones. And, you know, we've got to be frugal with the people's money, at least our little chunk of the pie.
But we can't race to the bottom.
Nope, can't race to the bottom, but we can't, you know, it's hard to justify taking somebody. It's kind of hard to justify taking somebody's money to give to somebody else when the people you're taking it from are really having a hard time giving it.
Yeah, and we can only control what we can control.
Yep.
And I take a lot of pride in a couple things when it comes to our budgets. One, the graph that shows us compared to our comparable cities and where we are. The other is the fact that, once again, we are one of the lowest tax communities in the state of Minnesota. And we're able to do that and also provide an incredible array of Class A services and opportunities for our residents. So we are incredibly low taxed, and we are providing Class A service. This is something to be proud of. And you know, if any cuts need to be made, I think this levy's coming down even more, frankly, once we get those unknowns known. We have put a pretty big pillow in there, if you will. You know, basically, if your worst case scenario, because we want to make sure that we have everything we need for that preliminary levy. And I also have no doubt that we're going to continue to be the lowest cost of all of our comparable cities, because our costs are actually coming down per resident. So, but if we decide to not do something, that's where you get your services, or that's where you would get future savings. So if the body does not want to provide a service anymore, then those are the decisions that we made to lower it. But I think that the balance between the services of providing and being one of the low-taxed communities in the state is phenomenal and something we should be proud of. And frankly, I am, and talk about it all the time in public. It's not a bad thing. We're not taxing people out of their homes in Shakopee. That may be happening somewhere. That may be happening because of state and federal issues which we have no control over. But when it comes to what we're doing, we are exceptional stewards of the public money.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reinhardt. All right, so that takes us to A, city bill list. Then no.
No questions.
City bill list? Anybody?
No questions for me.
Let's see here. Okay. 9B, liaison administrative report.
Second half of the week.
Which way did we started over here?
Second half of the week goes that way, or second month.
Counselor Lara.
So nothing really liaison reporting. We had no meetings for school board meetings next or on the 21st. But I did meet with the CDA and just like what the others have done regarding their next project of, I called it the Henderson 2 because the name is undecided yet. But
Marge would like that.
met with them, toured the Henderson, and one thing that stood out to me is their fantastic management of their properties. I was very impressed on how well they kept it and the professionalism of the gal. And I didn't realize. I think what did she say, Angelica? 2016 they built that, and you go there and it looks brand new. Like it's a very very nicely kept property, and I think this will play a vital role in our growing senior community. So it was great to learn about.
Very good.
Thank you, Mayor. I too don't have any liaisons, but I had the opportunity to tour two. One with Jesse here, the Hendersons, and talked about the future project there that will be happening at the central building where it currently stands. But the other one was the Benedictine Windermere Way. Now that building to me is pretty cool. I went home and I told my husband, can't wait to be 55. He's like, for what? I'm like, we're gonna move over there. He's like, no, you're not. No,
Be a
I'm
nice
not.
park with a
It
tower.
was just so, seriously, I just enjoyed really touring it and meeting the group that's there. I know it's a group of sisters from, I can't remember exactly, sorry guys, but it's just wonderful people there, yeah.
Well, don't rush yourself.
No,
55
I
plus. 55 plus does have its disadvantages.
I know, I was just kidding. That's it.
Mr. Whiting.
Thank you. I didn't have any liaisons. Take the summer off there for July, I guess, and beginning of August. But we'll have some coming up at the end of the month here.
Very good. Mr. Delaney?
Okay, so for SPUC, again, we'll bring up backflow testing. As of 7 August, there's been 3,400 out of 3,800 compliant. Again, this year, using it for more educational purposes. Keep reminding people this is federal to state requirement. This is not coming down from SPUC. This is not a money grab. Everybody keeps still thinking that. And as of to date, there's been about a 40% fail rate reported. Host backflow preventers.
4%?
40%.
40%.
Yeah.
Jeez, that's pretty high.
Mine actually exploded. I had to get it replaced.
So you're one of them. As far as SPUC AMI installations, they'll be rolled. This is basically the remote monitoring for water and electricity. There'll be a rollout with Canterbury. Then they'll expand after that rollout. And again, this will be remote monitoring for your electrical and water usage.
Automated meter reading kind of thing?
Automated meter reading, yes. 169 Coalition. Got a chance to tour the CHS terminal in Savage. They do provide a significant benefit to the state. I don't know if you get a chance to go do that tour. It's impressive what they do there. Also got a chance to go on top of one of the silos that is high up. I kind of stayed in the center. I didn't go to the edge there.
You're Air Force, right?
Yes. Afraid of heights there. They receive more than 45,000 trucks and 4,000 rail cars loaded with commodities in a year. They ship commodities in more than 9,900 barges and 853 rail cars in a year. the updates on 13 were critical to help making that a safe passage for the truck drivers. Met with our county commissioner, had a great conversation down at the Brew Hall. Talked to several residents, and I get to talk to, again, this Friday, about their taxes, so that'll be fun. I did get an earful on those taxes, so. I also went to Benedictine, and the request from Benedictine was adding benches along the walkway. They said they walk halfway up and tired to get to the top, and are more tired. And I think there may be good news there, so that's everything.
Very good. Back to the Henderson. They don't have a whole lot of noise complaints for the police either, so.
I wonder why.
So they're keeping their parties internal.
Quite the party room. We were actually quite impressed with that.
Yeah. August 3rd, I attended Matt Conway's police officer Matt Conway's retirement. I believe it was 25 years of service. Is that correct? Yep. Sad to see him go. Haven't seen a resolution. I'll vote no if it comes this way. Great guy. Sorry to see him go, but good luck in his adventures. Tuesday, August 8th, I met with the seniors at the community center, had some coffee, sit down and talk to a couple of different groups. One of these days, I might even learn how to play them cards that they play up there. I'm not trying to force myself any older than I already am, Councilor Contreras. And I did attend the 169 Corridor Coalition, just a meeting part, not the tour. It was good to see some old folks, old friends that I worked alongside with, and see the new leadership that they have there. Still a lot of projects on the north and the south, and we still have that one main driver right in the middle. That seems to be the restricted point crossing the river. And you know, it's not just here. The river is just a natural barrier from populations wherever you go. And this one just isn't built to the capacity it needs to be, so. It's only going to get worse, so we got to add capacity, whether it's at that location or a future 41 river crossing. We had that great discussion about that with the full membership. I'm not biased. I don't care where you put the capacity, either a future 41 river crossing or increase the bridge that they designed for that added capacity. One or the other. Make up your minds and let's get going, right? Mr. Reynolds, your report?
Nothing from me, sir. Thank you.
Very good. Any other business before this council?
Mayor,
Mr.
I have
Lara?
a question for staff before I proceed with any other business that I might potentially bring up.
Go ahead.
I don't know if this is a question for Mr. Kursky or Mr. Reynolds. When's the expected date that those parklets are coming down for the season? Do you have an
Michael?
or-
Parklets, Bill?
Okay. So for other business.
Did you say October? Okay.
All right. So in that case, I would like to bring up discuss at the next council meeting, taking one of them down early to resolve parking congestion that's going on because of the River City project, because that project's slated to not complete until like the middle of September. And I get that we're not going to talk about this until September, but anything that will help is better than nothing. So, and you never know, a project could exceed the timeline that's projected. So I just want to, hearing from businesses and constituents, I think it's something we should talk about.
Okay. Let me jump in here and see if we can try to add some organizational here. So I don't disagree with you. To better understand this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Kursky, but the side of the street in front of Block 3 and 4 is kind of closed because of the construction that's going on there. So we're losing all of that parking. I don't know if one is taking one down. Maybe it should be two, or maybe it should be three. I don't know the answer.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
But what I'm thinking is, maybe we should see if there's consensus of the council right now to have staff, bring back at the next meeting, their best guess on taking a couple out, maybe rearranging where they're located, and see if we can't get that rolling for the next meeting. So the question I pose to council is, what do we want to do from that standpoint? And I'm kind of looking at it from the Block 3 and 4 loss. you know, it doesn't seem to make sense to take one around a corner way up here out unless it's not being utilized. I don't know that. You'd have to ask the downtown. Mr. Whiting?
I guess I'd ask if staff had a contract. I know there's a fee involved and,
Yeah, there's a licensing fee involved with the parklets. It's interesting to note, we had over 7,000 people in downtown for Rhythm on the Rails the other night, and they all found somewhere to park. There's parking downtown. The key has always been, and the issues, and it's only from some of the members of the downtown community, what I've always said, if you guys can agree to what you want us to recommend for council, we'll be more than happy to do that. But we take the parklets, now we've ticked off those individuals that have the parklets. You know, this project will be finished in mid-September. If you take 2 parklets, you're probably gaining 10 parking spots. The majority of the day, there's plenty of parking both behind Block 3 and 4 as well as in other city parking areas. There's a vocal minority who believes there's never going to be enough parking in downtown. We have brought on our survey that will be coming out very soon to the public 2 questions when it comes to downtown parking. The first being, are you willing to have your taxes raised so we can put in parking meters downtown and we can then have enforcement in downtown to alleviate this perceived parking problem? Or would you be willing to have your taxes raised to build a parking structure in downtown? Because anything we do is going to require money for what is essentially a long-term solution for a perception problem. There is plenty of parking downtown. What people want is they want to be able to stop directly in the store, but those same people will walk 2.5 blocks from the Walmart parking lot to get into Walmart. So it's a matter of perception. But
We parked at Huber Park and took the tunnel over for the Rhythm on the Rails. And there wasn't many parked in the park, but whatever. Actually, there's actually room in the Levy Drive parking lot where the old substation used to be.
there's always room there.
Yeah, that parking lot was, and I should have parked there because it's closer to the tunnel, right? But I didn't, but whatever. So what do we want to do as a council, Mr. White?
I would ask if the businesses that were there had issues with the parking that have the parklets and they would voluntarily want to get rid of one to alleviate that issue, then I would consider moving it ahead. I think that it's a process that city staff goes in. When they come in, it's packaging them up and putting them away and boxing them up, and so they want to get it all done in one shot, and that's how I see it. But I'm kind of making a guess here. They don't want to piecemeal it, but.
Brovis is already gone.
what's that?
The parklet at Brovis.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we've already removed the Bravis parking lot
Okay.
because
So
it was,
yeah,
Bravis was
they're
closed, so
gone.
that's right. Yeah.
So as far as the one in front, I would ask the business owners if they're willing.
Mr. Delaney, what's your thoughts?
So you have a group of businesses downtown. I think we should listen to their concerns. That's one of the things that keeps getting brought up is parking. I mean, I know you're not going to satisfy everybody, but in this case, we are doing construction. We are ripping up literally one side of First Avenue, and there's no parking. I do agree. When I go down there and park, I park and walk, but that's my preference. I know where there's a lot of parking to be had. But if it is impacting businesses getting throughput, then that's a concern that we should take and look at.
We've been dealing with these parking issues
Yeah.
for
I'm
ever.
It's been at least 20-some years in my world.
Yes.
Right.
Councilor Contreras?
Thank you, Mayor. I think my only reasoning in wanting to maybe do it is because of the construction. That's my only reason. Otherwise, since I was elected, that was one of my biggest issues too. Like, they wanted, a certain parking for their business. And that is hard because I too myself, I will park in the back, those parking, by where the Fresh Market is, that's always, there's always a spot available. But I've driven and I know it's super tight to get through there. It's super tight right now to even find a spot. It is hard, and I go there often. I'm at this post office, I'm at the bakery, and it is, but I already know where to go. I know where to park. So, I mean, this is the only reason, because of construction, that I would be in favor to
Well, in that
remove
case,
them.
can I offer a compromise if we could talk to our contractors and open up some spaces early?
Let's, Mr. Whiting, I know Counselor Lara had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I did. And so, to Councilor Contreras' point, I'm only speaking of the parking because of the construction going on. This is not to pacify any specific businesses. This is not to fix the perceived problem of any downtown parking. It's solely based on the situation we have temporarily. If this is something we want to discuss later on in the year, we can, but right now, I don't want it to get lost that we're talking about now, not any issues that have came up previously of any perceived parking issues, so.
So let me ask staff a question. Bravis, they just took down Bravis's,
Bravi's, yeah.
Bravis.
Yeah.
Is that located on First Avenue?
No, it's literally
Yeah.
50 yards down Lewis Street, if
Yeah.
that. It's not even that. It's 25 yards off Lewis, down Lewis off the First.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of issues here. One is, when you're stopping in to pick up pizza at Domino's, you want to be able to stop, pick it up, and go. It's not like you're going to park in the park, take the tunnel, and be there for 4 hours, right? Although if you're going to Turtles and you're going to be there for a while, you could actually use the park and take the walk. But then if you're stopping for these other services that are in and out services, so we've got this mix, which is not necessarily bad. But sometimes you can't make that quick stop, pick up, and go. But I do like Counselor Whiting's idea of let's ask if anybody's willing to take some down early. That's not a bad idea, actually.
And let's ask their contractor too.
Ask contractor if they can make
Open up some
spaces
spaces,
available.
yeah.
Mr. Kursky? I'm thinking liability is probably
Yeah,
not there.
yeah, it could be, but
Ask, I mean, if we can move things around,
We have a meeting, mayor and council, with them tomorrow morning. I think the issue is, if you see, they're taking the entire sidewalk out to put the stormwater system in. All of those crates are sitting behind that fence right now, and you can only move so quickly. They're taking everything out at once.
Yeah, I think that's a long shot. I think there's a lot of liability there. So I think we can do probably both. Have staff look at, maybe removing one. Maybe we get lucky and somebody wants to voluntarily say, take ours down early to help the parking issue immediately for the construction or something like that.
we'll certainly engage.
And certainly come back and we'll continue this conversation at the
That'd
next
be the
meeting if
easiest.
that's acceptable. That's acceptable?
it's easy.
Okay.
Is that a motion on the table, or is that just?
It's a direction to
Direction,
staff
okay.
for other business.
We can't do it at this point, really.
We can't take action in other business, but this is a way for us to get there.
So we're gonna look at a couple of different options, and we're gonna continue the conversation at the next meeting. All right, any other business? Pleasure, council.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to adjourn to Tuesday, September 5th, 2023 at 7 p.m.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lara, seconded by Mr. Whiting. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, we are adjourned.